Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became the World's Greatest Liar? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. You should probably just give up. From where Izuku sits next to his mother, he can hear her SCK in a breath through her teeth. The doctor gets out of his rolling chair, tapping with his pen at the X-ray pinned on the wall. See these? He grunts, circling a portion of Izuku's foot with the same pen. Izuku has 2 joints in his little toe. From the research that's been done over the years, the consensus is that people with quirks just don't have this extra joint. It evolved out because it wasn't needed. Think of it like a marker. He sits back down in his seat, putting his clipboard and pen on the desk to his left. The medical community has dubbed the missing toe joint as evidence of the next stage of human evolution. Izuku has it, so in the tiny chance he's both an anomaly and a late bloomer, it's safe to say that Izuku will never have a quirk. Quirkless, Izuku thinks. I'm quirkless, wrong, useless, unevolved. The little boy's hands shake so much he drops his all-might figurine. It falls to the floor with a hollow clacking sound. Midoriya Inko frowns, her stomach twisting. She can see the tears gathering in the corners of her son's eyes. Inko pulls Izuku's toy to her with her quirk and hands it back to him. But there is a chance, right? She pushes, folding her hands in her lap. Izuku could have a quirk? The doctor sighs, dragging a hand across his face as though this conversation exhausts him. Yes, he admits. It's possible. Among the several thousand test subjects that were studied, one had the mutation dash. But it is possible, Inko confirms, feeling no guilt at interrupting the doctor. She's all too aware that Izuku has gone still in the chair by her side. The doctor narrows his eyes with a pig-like snort. If you would, Midoriya-san, could you enlighten me on your family's quirk history? Your 5th generation, yes? Inko nods. I am, but my quirk isn't that special. I can move small objects towards myself. My mother's quirk was telekinesis. My dad's was electron manipulation. She smiles awkwardly, rubbing the back of her neck. I guess I got the short end of the stick when it came to genetics, huh? And your husband? What about his quirk? The doctor picks up his pen and starts writing again, seeming deep in thought. Inko chews at her lip. He told me he could breathe fire, but I've never seen him use it. Hisashi left to work abroad shortly after Izuku was born. He's more metal than man these days. She sighs, looking at her hands. And I never met his family. He didn't talk about them either. I don't know anything about his side, quirk-wise. The doctor seems stricken for a second before his face is a steel mask again, and Inko doesn't know if she simply imagined it or not. He quickly jolts down a few notes before deciding to toss the entire clipboard into the trash can at his feet. The doctor stands, pacing swiftly to the door. Inko follows, confused and concerned, while Izuku trails behind lethargically. He opens it, a frown on his lips, and motions for the pair to leave. I'm sorry to be so abrupt, but I'm afraid this appointment is over. Inko's brow furrows. Never before had she been treated so rudely. It was utterly bewildering, and she opens her mouth to retort until Izuku's tiny fingers wrap around her palm. They were trembling, just slightly, but it was enough to convince Inko to accept the doctor's, albeit frank, end to the visit. She politely bows, despite herself. Thank you for your time, doctor. His name blanks in her mind. Ujiko. The doctor finishes for her, his strange goggles gleaming in the fluorescent lights of the hospital hall. Inko and Izuku are ushered out of the examination room, feeling none the better than how they'd arrived. Izuku, Inko calls gently, leading him to the waiting room by his hand so they can schedule his next physical. Let's go to the bookstore, yeah? Maybe you can pick up some books on quirks while you're there, for your notebooks? Izuku nods numbly, staring at his feet. Inko can feel her son's sadness as if it was her own, but she clings to his hopes with all her might, praying she never has to let him down. Hey! She kneels, lifting his chin with her nimble fingers. Maybe this didn't turn out the way we would have liked. That happens sometimes. She sighs, collecting her thoughts. But life is never a straight path, Aizu. Otherwise, we'd be stuck behind every twig in our way. She pokes his nose to enunciate her point. He giggles. I don't want you to follow the destiny set out for you. Think outside the box, bend the rules, I don't care. When Izuku's eyes well up with tears, she pulls his little body close. You will be a hero, she whispers in his ear, past his unruly curls. My Izuku will find a way. You're strong like that. I love you, Mama, Izuku murmurs, voice thick, his arms reassuringly tucked around her neck. I love you too, she smiles back. Inko picks her son up, rubbing soothing circles into his back as he sniffles. After working out the details for their visit, she carries him back to the car. He falls asleep the second his head hits the back of his tiny seat. Tired little boy, she murmurs, giggling under her breath. She places a kiss on his forehead. You've had a big day, huh? When Inko sits behind the wheel, she lets the melancholy rush over her for a second. I wonder if I said all those things to convince myself instead of Izuku, she muses. Her eyes drift to the rearview mirror, where she can see him sleeping peacefully. Something clenches in her stomach. I can't let myself think that. I have to be strong for Izuku. For Hisashi. Her heart sinks a little when she thinks of Hisashi. He was still undoubtedly a painful memory. She didn't have a single photo of him left. He'd taken all the frames with him in them, family photos and cherished memories, all gone the same way he'd disappeared without another word. Her old phone had gone missing too, its data cleared, so now it was easier to see Hisashi as simply a figment of her imagination. When he walked out, every notion that he had been a kind and thoughtful man was destroyed. She had married him, birthed him a son, and he'd vanished. She was ashamed to say she still loved him, deep down. She never stopped. He had once been the light of her life alongside Izuku, and after her only son's birth 4 years ago, she was the happiest she had ever been. Hisashi had been lovely, funny, charming. His hair was curly and pale, almost white, and his eyes were the most incredible shade of red. If it hadn't been for the check he sent at the end of every month, Inko might have tried forgetting him if she could. In her rearview mirror, she notices Izuku mumbling, his eyelashes fluttering as he falls deeper into sleep. In her mind's eye, she sees that same bright intelligence reflected at her in her son's eyes. The color isn't quite the same, but she sees Hisashi in him nevertheless. Inko starts the car, pulling out of the hospital parking lot and onto the road. Her grip on the steering wheel was tighter than necessary as the words the doctor said came back to her. You should probably just give up. Well, she thought, Zuku's not a quitter. She gently shakes him awake when they reach the bookstore, holding his hand as they enter. Izuku still looks sullen as they pass the clerk with a little, hello. Inko leads him towards the cork section. Soon enough, they are surrounded by books of every size, color, thickness, and texture imaginable. As Inko scans the titles on one shelf, Izuku ducks away, sitting on the floor with a massive illustrated encyclopedia. Oh, what's that, Aizu? She asks, getting down to kneel beside him. When he flashes the cover, she chews at her lip with a furrowed brow. It says, The Kobayashi Encyclopedia of Quirks and Bionic Alterations. That's a big book. Are you sure you want to read that? She says, watching as Izuku's finger traces over the characters on the page. It's slow, but the boy is managing better than Inko has seen some 10-year-olds. I think I can do it, he says after a long pause. Sensei gives me big books to read at school. His gaze is focused solely on the book. There's a photo of a custom bionic eye on the page, notes beside detailing the model, quirk statistics of the user below it. She pats him on the head and stands, trusting him to read on his own. She remembered his teachers at kindergarten mentioning that he was gifted. Still, Inko had always known her kid had something special. Hisashi had told her once that he'd been a smart kid too. Inko herself had always gotten good grades when she was in school, but words had never come naturally to her. She continues perusing the books, noticing him picking out another from the shelf. This one looks significantly lighter, and Izuku immerses himself in it, mumbling quietly. Inko chuckles, her eyes catching on 2 volumes, side by side. She pulls them out, glancing over their titles with interest, Quirk Bionics, with illustrations, and Quirk Theory for Beginners. Inko passes the books down to Izuku for his approval. The little boy looks up at her, his eyes wide. He nods and takes them, setting them down on his growing pile of texts. Inko dreads having to pay for them, but she deems them worth it, especially after the day they've had. Almost done. She's relieved to see Izuku smile. The little boy quickly hugs her side, and the two pick up their books, heading to the register. The clerk manning it grins at Izuku as they set their things down. Izuku stands on his toes to see over the counter, eyeing her hands, which seem to have been replaced with metal up to her mid-arm, soundless joints flexing as she went about her tasks. The clerk notices Izuku's staring and gently outstretches her hand to him after she's finished scanning their books. "Isn't it cool?" the clerk says to Izuku, the boy taking her hand in his own gingerly. He's amazed at how dexterous her fingers are, as though he's never seen tech like it before, but Inko knows Izuku has. He's surrounded by them every day. He examines it as if trying to memorize every screw, plate, and wire. She smiles at his intense interest. "When my quirk first manifested, I had trouble using it," she explains in a slow voice. "It was so weak that I hardly even realized I had it. Then, when biotech came around, I finally had a quirk again." Izuku nods, a little shy, letting go of the kind clerk's hand. "Thank you for showing me," he says, and Inko squeezes his shoulder proudly. "It was my pleasure," the clerk chirps, waving to them as they leave. Izuku bursts with energy outside the shop, swinging his bags back and forth as he skips to the car. "What are you thinking about?" she asks, giggling at the goofy grin he'd been flashing. He stills and looks up at his mother. His expression suddenly ages 10 years. She's concerned, but Izuku plasters a smile on his face again. "I know what I need to do to become a hero," he says, grabbing for his mother's free hand. "I'm glad," Inko replies affectionately, leading him to the car. She feels wistful, despite herself. "Every day, Hisashi, he acts more like you. Deku, are you really going to play hero?" "Kaken is mean sometimes. Actually, he's mean most of the time." But Izuku still follows him around. He's his oldest friend, why wouldn't he? Izuku stands his ground, shielding a crying boy from Kaken. He squares his metal fists, feeling the cheap material scrape against his skin. "Next time, I'll think to wear gloves over my hands before putting these on. You're not going to hurt him any longer. I won't let you. Can't you see you've made him cry?" Izuku yells, but his knees shake when Kaken and his two lackeys only draw closer, laughing all the while. "What are those?" The boy with wing, Tsubasa, Izuku remembers, wrinkles his nose in disgust. "What are they even supposed to be? It looks like you welded scrap metal together all willy-nilly." Kaken grits his teeth, palms sparking. "He's trying to copy mine," he growls, and Izuku can't help the sting of shame that zings deep in his chest. Of course he'd taken inspiration for his enhancement gloves from Kaken. Kaken's so cool. Kaken had recently been outfitted with biotech to replace his broken fingers and parts of his palms. Afterward, he'd been able to let out bigger and better blasts, the kinds that evaporated the paper he held over his hand to show off to them. Izuku wanted to build something like that. So maybe it was copying, but only a little bit. Izuku hadn't thought of it that way when he'd started his project. Kaken grabs Izuku by the collar. "Only people with quirks use tech, you idiot Deku. I should teach you a lesson, since you can't seem to get it through that blockhead of yours." Katsuki's lackeys grab Izuku's arms from behind, with one massive hand on his head to keep him from struggling. "What are you doing?" he cries, fighting to get away. He clicks the button on his right thumb, his gloves start to heat up. Kaken's palms crackle, and he rears to clock Izuku with an explosion. Izuku musters all his strength into a single push, barely wrenching free of Tsubasa's hold. He lands a scorching blow on Kaken's left cheek before the latter can even react, a series of pops scorching Izuku's hand as his glove begins to malfunction. Out of the corner of his eye, Midoriya spots the boy he'd been protecting running away. He's gratified that he'd been able to save him, even though he made himself the punching bag instead. Kaken's friends are quick to grab Izuku again, and the curly-haired boy is too surprised at his success to give too much of a fight. Kaken stands over him, outraged, chest heaving, as a burn in the shape of a fist appears on his cheek. He grabs a handful of Izuku's hair, getting in close. Izuku cries out, tears and snot running down his lips. "You like hot stuff, right?" He taunts, letting go of Izuku's hair and placing his palm on the boy's face. Izuku shrieks in fear, struggling to escape. "I wonder how you'll like it when I boil your face off?" Kaken laughs at Izuku's screams of terror as the quirkless boy's face goes up in flames. For what feels like years, all Izuku knows is the broiling, searing sensation of his skin melting. Izuku clutches his face, writhing in agony, his hands sticking to raw flesh and tearing it up like wet tissue paper. The roaring of flames dances behind his eyelids, a supernova exploding in his eye sockets. Ripping, pulling, cracking, snapping, his face rearranging, his skin concaving. His throat tears raw as he breathes in smoke, his hair is burning. His mouth tastes of blood. Izuku cries salty tears, and he can feel the stinging path they carve down his cheeks. He cries harder. His brain goes numb. Izuku can't see, can't hear, maybe he's dying. And then, it all stops as suddenly as it started. "Hey kid." Someone is tapping Izuku's forehead, and he grimaces in pain as he starts to climb out of the clutches of sleep. His eyes take a second to clear. "Good, you're awake. Where's my mom?" Izuku groans, squinting at the bright light above him. Izuku reaches up to touch his face, but he only feels tape and gauze underneath his fingertips. When Izuku looks at his hands, he finds them battered, burned, bruised, and covered with a smattering of bandages. Izuku panics when he realizes his gloves are gone. A stranger's hand covers his own as they start to shake. Hey, your support items are over there," the stranger says kindly. Izuku looks up at her. Her hair is black, braided into dreadlocks, with a stocky frame and big, rough hands. Her clothing is casual and smudged with dirt and grease. He follows where her other hand points to a table across the room. It's at that moment that Izuku realizes where he is a workshop, it seems. He sits on a workbench, half-finished projects lying around the room and across every flat surface. Tools are littered everywhere, but the space where Izuku had been laying was clear, for the most part. Besides him is a pillow, and he disentangles his hands from the stranger's to pull it to his chest. "I don't know where your mom is. I was hoping you'd tell me, little guy," the stranger says. At the stranger's side, a little girl with pink hair similar to the stranger's fidgets, obviously eager to talk to him. Izuku nods, but his thoughts are elsewhere. He touches the tape and gauze on his face once again. "So I wasn't dreaming," Izuku thinks, furrowing his brow. His face still stung, but not as bad as before. That pain had been unreal. "You were in a bad accident of some kind. Did your quirk do that to you? Or the gloves?" The stranger asks quietly, searching Izuku's heavily bandaged face for guilt or fear. Izuku shakes his head and she gasps. "Oh dear. Can I go home?" Izuku asks, his voice little more than a whisper. The stranger bites their lip, considering something. "May here goes to your school. How come I've never seen you?" she asks. The little girl perks up at the mention of her name. Izuku looks at his feet, which dangle over the edge. "I like to play by myself. They leave me alone if I build things and read." For Hatsune Megumi, things come a little more into focus. Looking down at the tiny boy, this broken spirit before her, she realizes just what he is and what she'd be for judging him for it. She glances over at his broken gloves. The metal had been fused surprisingly well, the joints fully functioning. He had even hidden a small detonator in the thumb. She was undoubtedly impressed with the craftsmanship, and now that she knows the child in front of her had built it entirely himself, she can't help the pride that wells up in her chest. "Well," Hatsune murmurs, bending over a bit to pat him on the shoulder reassuringly. "May likes to build things too. Maybe next time at school, you two can build together." Izuku brightens up at the idea. "That sounds like fun." May smiles and looks up at her mother. "But before any of that can happen, I need to get you home to your mother. She's probably worried sick. Can you tell me your last name, so I can look her up in the phone book? Or do you have it memorized?" "No, I remember it," Izuku says, reciting the number to Hatsum with ease. Hatsum pulls her phone from the pocket of her coveralls and dials, hoping she'd gotten it right. The phone rings once before it's picked up. Izuku! An anxious-sounding woman shrieks into the phone. Hatsum has to hold it away from her ear with a cringe. Yes, your boy is here. He was hurt, so I took him home to fix him up. Hatsum tells the woman, and she quiets down a little but still sounds scared beyond belief. Is he okay? Does he need to see the doctor? She asks frantically, and Hatsum has the guts to crack a tired smile. He's fine for the most part. My quirk fixed most of his flesh wounds, but the really bad burns will take longer to heal. The other voice on the line goes silent, and the only thing Hatsum can hear is her panicked breathing. Burns. The woman breathes, her heart breaking loud enough for Megumi to hear. I think it's best that you come as quickly as you can. Hatsum trails off. Midoriya. Midoriya Inko. Izuku's mother murmurs, her voice quivering with unshed tears. Hatsum gives Izuku's mother her address and ends the call slowly, worrying her lower lip between her teeth. She turns to Izuku, his face shadowed by curly green hair. Hatsum picks up Mei and sets her down next to him on the workbench. Okay, you two. I'm going to make some tea. She juts her thumb at the doorway that leads to the kitchen. Don't burn the house down, please. She pats Mei's hair, then Izuku's, and leaves the two be. Your name is Izuku, right? Can I call you Izuku? Mei asks right away, and Izuku is somewhat confused at first. Nobody talks to him so straightforwardly at school. But he nods anyway, wondering if this meant they were friends. Izuku likes the idea of having a friend, so he says, if you call me Izuku, does that mean I can call you Mei? Mei nods quickly. Of course. Why wouldn't you? Izuku chews at his lip. Do you make stuff like I do? He redirects quietly, looking at his feet, afraid she might blow up as Katsuki did. Yep. She nods proudly. Me and Mama make all sorts of things. Mama works for a support company, so she lets me help out when she has too much stuff to do. Mama specializes in biotech, and because so many people need it, we're always busy, but I don't mind. She counts the syllables on her fingers. Mommy is a nurse, so she's always working, but when she's home, she sits on that bench over there. She points to the only organized spot in the entire room. She likes to watch. That's so cool, Izuku murmurs, awestruck. He starts to look more closely at the projects strewn about the room. He notices metal limbs with wires and plastic tubes hanging out of them, weapons, such as the giant flamethrower sitting under their table. Enhancement tech of all shapes and sizes, too. There's a massive half-finished robot reminiscent of the Iron Giant in the far corner of the room. Do you want to work in support when you grow up, Izuku? Mei asks, toying with the wiring of a half-finished toy robot she pulled out of her pocket. Your gloves were really awesome. My mama says she was impressed. Izuku shakes his head. No, he says simply. Mei tilts her head. Then what do you want to be? Izuku debates telling her, bouncing around the pros and cons in his head. So far, she hadn't said anything that could be interpreted as mean. Maybe she could be trusted? Izuku looks up at the ceiling, noticing the scorch marks there. I want to be a hero. He says softly. Whoa! She marvels, throwing the toy aside to give him her full attention. That's so cool. I bet you have an awesome quirk, right? Right. Izuku flinches and tries to hide it, but Mei notices. Oh, she says, her yellow eyes focusing on him differently. You're quirkless. Hopefully not for long, Izuku asks, blushing with embarrassment down to the roots of his green hair. Do you care? No, not really. It just means you'll have to work harder than anybody else. She replies, picking up a different trinket. But it is cool, you know. I've never met somebody quirkless before. They must be right when they say not a lot of people are left that don't have quirks. Izuku had never felt so relieved in his life. Cool, he says, and they work in silence, messing around with the junk in Megumi's reject pile. Later, they hear an urgent knocking at the front door, down the same hallway where Mei's mother disappeared. Megumi enters the room again, carrying 4 mugs of steaming green tea. She sets them down on the nearest decluttered table with a smile and goes to open the door. Izuku! Inko cries when she's led in the doorway, and Izuku leaps off the table to run to her side, hugging her as tightly as he could without hurting his hands. Mei returns to Megumi, grinning. I haven't seen you all day, I was so worried. You're Midoriya-san, right? Megumi smiles, basking in the warmth of their reunitement. Inko looks up at her from where she's kneeling just off the Gen-kan and nods. We have a lot to talk about. I made tea. Inko smiles and stands, letting Izuku run off with Mei again. Thank you for your generosity. She bows politely, but Hatsum waves her off. No need for all that. It was my pleasure. She says, leading Midoriya to her workshop, where 2 full mugs sit steaming. The children must have already snuck off with the others. The 2 sit on stools, sipping the tea quietly in each other's company. You never mentioned your name. Inko starts and Megumi starts. It's Hatsum Megumi, but please call me Megumi. Hatsum is my wife. Megumi says, setting her cup down gently. Midoriya chuckles. Well, call me Inko. And thank you for helping my son, I don't know what I would have done. Inko drifts off. I don't even know who hurt my baby, but if I'd been there, I'd probably have chased them down. She thinks to herself. I'm sure you want to know what happened. Megumi murmurs, the mood suddenly somber. Inko nods and Megumi sighs. Mei and I found him while we were on a walk. Mei heard the screaming, Inko flinches, and ran ahead. Megumi pauses, the image of Izuku's ruined body worse than what she'd seen in even the worst workshop accidents. I don't even know how to describe what happened to his face. Ink freezes, all the blood draining from her cheeks. I used my quirk right away, and healed him enough that he didn't need to be wheeled away on a stretcher, but... Megumi cleared her throat and continued. The burns were so horrible. I made Mei turn around so she didn't have to see them, but if it makes you feel any better, it'll turn into one badass scar. Inko can feel anger starting to bubble up in her gut. The second Megumi said burns, Inko knew exactly who'd done this to her baby, but that made nothing easier. She coughs into her fist to hide a sob. Again, thank you. Inko's voice is watery, but her fists are clenched so tightly her knuckles go white. Don't mention it. Megumi reiterates. There's a pause. You know, Inko, she begins, trying to lift the tense atmosphere, our kids are really similar. Inko looks up but can't gather the energy to smile. How do you think? Megumi chuckles. When I found Izuku-chan, he was wearing support items he made himself. She pauses, debating what she says next. It's forgivable, since he's so young. She clears her throat, and as you can see, Megumi gestures widely to her workshop. I work for a support company, so my Mei also has a love for mechanics. Inko sighs, her lips gently quirking up at the corners, and she runs her thumb over the side of her mug sadly. The gloves. When he showed them to me today, he said that they would help him until his quirk came in and he could build real ones. I told him not to wear them out, it'd be dangerous if he was caught, but... Megumi furrows her brow in concern. His quirk hasn't come in yet? What is he, 5? Inko nods. When Izuku had a quirk test a few weeks ago, his doctor said there was a chance that he's a late bloomer, however it is still. Just a chance. But we can hope. She sips her tea, an attempt to calm her frazzled nerves. How did your husband take it? Megumi murmurs politely. Inko hides her sadness behind her hair. We haven't truly spoken in years. She pauses, choosing her words carefully. Works abroad. But he's always been understanding, and I have no doubts that he wouldn't have a problem with it. She chews her lip. He's not a prejudiced person, thankfully. Seems like a lot of people are these days. Only when the silence between them becomes thick enough to cut with a knife does Megumi finally sigh. She places her cup on the workbench quietly. So you're raising Izuku-chan alone? She ventures, hoping she doesn't accidentally strike a nerve. Inko smiles nervously. I'm trying, but I don't think I'm doing a great job of it. Megumi shakes her head, waving her arms as she speaks. Your little boy is tougher than nails, lady. You should be proud. Inko blushes, suddenly bashful. I should hope so, she says finally. I think he gets that from his father, to be honest. Megumi leans back on her stool. I don't know, Inko-san. She grins. Raising a quirkless kid in our society is far from easy, and yet, you're doing it all on your own. Megumi's eyebrow raises appraisingly. That takes guts. I think that you're too hard on yourself. Inko lifts her head. That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me in a long time. She murmurs. It's only because you're not listening. Megumi waves her hand dismissively. She pauses for a second and then reaches for her mug again. My wife would absolutely love you. You two are like peas in a pod. She sits up suddenly, spilling the tea on the table, realizing something. You should come to dinner tomorrow night. I've been meaning to bring guests over for the longest time, plus, Izuku and Mei really seem to be hitting it off. Inko brightens. We should eat at my house. I still have to repay you for helping my little boy. Then it's a deal. An hour later, as Inko and Izuku prepare to leave, Mei hugs Izuku as tightly as possible without jolting his injuries. We're gonna be best friends. She whispers in his ear. Izuku hugs her back, not as hard, but still there. Haika, I came across an interesting case today. A boy came in looking to have a quirk assessment. Go on, Ujikoha case. Well, he was quirkless. The boy's name is Midoriya Izuku. His father's name is Hisashi. Is he one of them? When you grow as wise as I am, Hakase, the patterns that stretch beyond us are clear. The proper groundwork must be laid out to ensure the success of a certain path, like a boat floating down the river of fate. The boy would fail without my guidance, like his brothers who came before him. When the time is right, he will come back to us, and he will have what is rightfully his again. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Haika. On another note, the results of his general examination were worrying. You might have gone too far. This could make things difficult. I expect you to keep a keen eye on him, Ujikoha case. He cannot be allowed to stray. As you wish, my Haika. All right, it looks like it's almost completely healed. Dr. Ujiko states, and Izuku flinches as he sticks another gauze pad to his cheek. I'll be putting him on another round of antibiotics. Some of his minor burns are looking pretty irritated. But other than that, it looks as though he was hardly burned at all. Back in a similar examination room to the one Izuku had been in several weeks ago, Inko's eyes dart to the door. She sits on a tall stool beside her son on the table. Her brain clings to the fact that Izuku is clearly uncomfortable. She wants to move things along as fast as possible, but a minor detail has her caught. Hardly burned? Could you elaborate? Inko asks, clutching her son's hand. When he squeezes it, she squeezes back. The scarring is mostly just from the force of the. You said it was an explosion, right? Your kid is lucky he didn't need facial reconstruction. With a blast like that, the entire upper half of his face could have blown off. Dr. Ujiko confirms clinically, continuing his work in silence as Inko fights to process what she's just heard. Could that be his quirk? Heat resistance. Inko searches. The doctor laughs, harsh and cold as if he found the idea utterly idiotic. Don't flatter yourself, Midoriya-san. Izuku just has tougher skin than most. He says, putting away his supplies in the cabinets across the room. Lots of kids do these days. Something in Inko sinks, but she nods anyway. Dr. Ujiko hands Inko a script. Take this to the pharmacy downstairs to get his prescription. Inko bows politely, helping Izuku off of the table. Before you two leave, Midoriya-san, I need your son to answer a few questions to finish up your visit today. Just a small psychiatric evaluation. You can go while we speak. Ujiko turns to face them, his eyes hidden behind those goggles. Inko couldn't make out his expression, but he seemed expectant, impatient. Inko is unsure, but when she looks down at her son, he smiles back at her. I'll be fine on my own, he seemed to say. The part of Inko that wants to mother him, to shelter him from anyone that might ever hurt him, is overwhelming her. The fear wells up in her chest like a particularly foul toad, and she swallows hard to get the taste of bile out of her mouth. Ujiko was a doctor. If she couldn't trust her son with him, who could she trust? Okay, she relents, and Izuku gently releases her hand to sit in a little chair on the opposite side of the room. Part of Inko dreads leaving him, but she opens the door and fights past her nerves. Dr. Ujiko sits down across from Izuku, his lips a firm line. Izuku swallows. So, Izuku-chan, the doctor begins, not unkindly. What do you want to be when you grow up? The compact ball sitting in Izuku's belly only grows tighter, and Izuku picks at his fingers nervously. He clutches his toy all might, hoping it would give him courage. The number one hero. He murmurs, knowing the words sound stupid coming from his quirkless mouth, but he says it anyway because he believes in them. The doctor frowns. Every child your age wants to be a hero. I thought you were more intelligent than to follow an unachievable dream. Haven't you given it any more thought? He probes, not pulling any blows on purpose. We need him to have the right amount of determination. Too much, and he will become astringent, useless. Izuku grits his teeth, hiding his expression underneath his hair. His band-aid covered fists clench so tightly his knuckles turn white. But Izuku mutters, his voice suddenly steely. But I'm going to work harder than anyone else to be one. Even if I have to start from scratch. Dr. Ujiko is stunned by these terrifying words from a 5-year-old. The boy before him looked downright feral, so different from the timid child of only a few seconds ago. If Ujiko hadn't watched the transformation himself, he wouldn't have believed it. You can't mean. Izuku looks up slightly, his green eyes brimming with contempt. I'm sick of people telling me what I can't do. So I'm going to be a hero, and no one will stop me. His lips are curved into a grimace resembling a smile. Looking into that little boy's expression, Ujiko can't help but be reminded of someone. The doctor clears his throat, ashamed of being intimidated by a kindergartner. Remember what he trusted you to do. That's all very well, Izuku, but simply believing in yourself is not going to make you a hero. It's not possible without a quirk. It just simply isn't. I don't want to be mean to you, but quirkless people make up only a small part of the population, and the world just isn't ready for a quirkless hero. Izuku clenches his jaw so hard it creaks. I don't care what you say. You're just like everyone else. I'm not little anymore. Izuku jumps up, his little chest heaving. I'm going to find my mom now. Izuku, please consider dash. Izuku hauls the door open, racing out into the hall, feeling positively murderous. Deku, are you really going to play hero? You should probably just give up. You want to be a hero? What kind of joke is that? It's not even funny. Wait, you're quirkless? I couldn't even tell. I mean, you don't act quirkless at all. But that would be a good thing, right? Memories of every person who'd ever put him down flash through his mind as he wandered the hospital's halls. It just means you'll have to work harder than anyone else. He isn't really paying attention. Izuku crashes into another body, falling to the floor in a heap of tangled limbs. Sorry, I'm so sorry. He apologizes, reaching out a hand after getting up himself. The boy looks at him with an air of caution and slowly takes it. The left side of his face is wrapped up in gauze, a lot like his own. Izuku pulls him up but doesn't leave. The boy looks like he has something to say. Izuku notices that his hair is oddly colored, red on one side and white on the other, like a pokeball. He thinks. You're like me. He murmurs, his face guarded and emotionless. Izuku takes a step back to give him some space and tilts his head. What do you mean? Someone hurt you too, didn't they? The boy seemed to be reading his very soul. You're very angry. Oh, well, I'm not angry anymore. Izuku starts picking at his fingers. Actually, I am just a little bit, and then, as an afterthought. Did someone do that to you? As he points towards the gauze on the boy's face. The boy scrunches his eyebrows. You didn't answer my question. Okay, Izuku says. He doesn't want to start an argument now, after the one he just had only moments ago. My friend. He was the one who used his quirk on me. They say it's almost healed now, but I haven't seen what it looks like yet. The boy hums. Izuku lets a little frown mar his young face. Will you tell me about what happened to you? He asks politely, but the boy shakes his head. Then, will you tell me your name? The boy shoves his hands in the pockets of his dress pants. Shuto, he says curtly. I'm Izuku, he replies, giggling at Shuto's tone. You like heroes, right? Shuto pauses and then nods. That's cool. Izuku grins, showing him his All Might figurine. My favorite is All Might. What about you? Who do you like? Shuto smiles slightly and shoves his tiny hands into his pants pockets. I like All Might too. Isn't he the greatest? Did you see that rescue a few days ago, when he saved that boy with the vinegar quirk? I wasn't there, but I saw it on the news. His face was all dash. Izuku screws his eyes shut and grins, a shoddy imitation of the look he'd seen on the man's face on TV the day before. It was really cool. He exhales. I bet you saw that video online, right? The one with that factory that blew up? That one's the best, don't you think? Todoroki opens his mouth to reply but gets interrupted. Shuto! Someone yells from down the hall, and little Shuto huffs low in his throat, his expression stormy, but he doesn't turn around. Izuku tilts his head inquisitively before he sees the person who had yelled. What did I tell you about running off? I've been looking for you all over. A tall man who looked to be in his mid-30s was striding towards the pair, his beard flaming, short-shorn hair of vibrant red. He was frowning, a sneer showing his displeasure. Izuku recognizes him as he draws closer, sking in a breath through his teeth. Endeavor. Endeavor had never been one of Izuku's favorites. He'd always been too cold in front of the cameras, and his toys were never as cool as All Might's. Seeing him in person only cemented this belief. The hero grabs Shuto by the shoulder, peering down at Izuku scornfully. And who's this? Midoriya Izuku, sir. Izuku bows at the waist dutifully, as his mother had taught him to whenever talking to new adults, despite his distaste. Endeavor grunts. Come, Shuto. We're leaving. He starts steering Shuto away, but Izuku catches his wrist. Will I see you again? He asks with a smile, his cheeks warming when Shuto nods. Shuto allows himself to be led away by his father, muttering curses under his breath the whole way. Shuto, Enji says when they're out of earshot of the curly-haired boy. Don't get attached to other children. They'll only get in the way. Shuto pools all the contempt he can into his voice when he mutters, okay. But Shuto's mind keeps going back to the boy Izuku, his name was. Nobody has ever been that friendly to me, he thinks to himself. Early on, he had learned that there was always some kind of ulterior motive for any conversation attempts. Reporters wanted to know about his father, and the other children at the business parties were snobby and never cared. The kids at the kindergarten were scared of him and had a fondness for practical jokes at his expense. Having someone to talk about heroes that weren't his father felt nice. He made a little promise to his new friend. I swear I won't forget. Izuku wanders around the hospital a while longer, feeling strangely melancholic now that the anger has left him. Entirely. Izuku? Why are you all the way down here? A familiar voice calls from behind him, and he turns, running to embrace his bewildered mother. He smashes his cheek into her pant leg with a twinge. Can we go home now? He whines, his voice muffled. Inko laughs, ruffling his hair affectionately. Alrighty, mister. Let's head out. Maybe we can get Katsudon for dinner. How does that sound? Izuku cheers and he and Inko leave the hospital with smiles on their faces. While Inko sleeps, Izuku slips out of bed. His feather-light footsteps don't make a sound as he steps into the bathroom, closing the door behind him before flicking on the light. Izuku stares into the big mirror above the sink, his fingers tracing over the gauze taped to his nose and cheeks. I still haven't seen what it looks like, the little boy thinks to himself. His band-aid-covered fingers slowly peel the tape away, first on his left cheek. He starts to see the angry red of burns across his eyelids and cheekbones, and then the marks that look like someone had taken a knife to his face, splitting it down the middle. Horrified curiosity grips him from head to toe, and he rips the rest of the gauze off in one go. He chokes down a sob as he looks upon his ruined face. A small chunk of his upper nose is misshapen, as though the healing session couldn't recover what had been there before. His fingers feel the roughness of the new skin stretching across his cheeks, just below his eyes, and the way it seems to dip a little. The burns have scabbed over, but the damage from Katsuki's blast would never truly disappear. When he stares, he feels anger at himself and loathing self-pity for being unsightly, ugly, useless, quirkless. Silently, tears roll down his tender, still healing face. Izuku smashes the mirror. There's blood on his hands and glass littering the floor like autumn leaves, stained red. The little bits of mirror crunch under Izuku's slippers. Izuku doesn't bother cleaning up the mess just yet, and instead reattaches the gauze to his face. When he's done, it doesn't feel nearly as secure as it did before, but he doesn't care. He examines his fists, which have shards of glass embedded in them, and he grits his teeth and picks them out one by one with his nails almost clinically. He washes away the blood, finally glad that dreaded mirror is gone forever. Just like his mother had taught him, he sweeps up glass, deciding that he can't do anything about the blood without a mop. Izuku? What are you doing in the— oh my god. Shaking hands grab Izuku's wrists, forcing him to drop the broom. Inko kneels next to him, examining his raw and bleeding hands. She looks up at Izuku, her eyes watering with tears and her lip wobbling with horror. What? Why did you do this? Izuku, do you even know what you've done, baby? Will you look at me? Just look at me. She grabs his chin when he keeps turning away, and the little boy bites his lips so hard it turns white. Why did you do this? She asks, her voice coarse with emotion. Izuku feels the tears drip down his cheeks again, getting soaked up by the gauze. I can't look at my face anymore. I just want to be normal again. His mother wraps her arms around him, stifling her terror. I don't want to be quirkless anymore. Izuku sobs and Inko rubs a soothing hand up and down his back. I'm sorry, she whispers. I'm so sorry. Izuku cries a little more quietly now, blood from his right fist dripping onto her nightshirt. Inko can't bring herself to be angry with him. Hey, she whispers after a few minutes of listening to him hiccup. Let's get you cleaned up. You still have school tomorrow. Izuku whimpers, fingers curling in her shirt. Izuku, she asks, holding him at arm's length. She purses her lips to keep from frowning at him. Katsuki-chan's the one who did it, isn't he? He hesitates for a second and then slowly nods. Inko sighs, gripping his arms a little tighter. Listen to me, Aizu. I'm going to go to school with you tomorrow, and I'm going to make sure he never hurts you ever again. You hear me? Izuku nods, still looking a little bleary-eyed. Inko cleans him up and dresses his wounds. She takes him back to bed, and he falls asleep quickly enough to be concerning. While he sleeps, Inko cleans up the blood and glass on the floor, rage bubbling in the pit of her stomach. Suddenly, she understands how murderers feel. Inko walks Izuku to school today. His kindergarten isn't far from their home, less than a mile, and she's already called to work and said she'll be late. They step through the doors into the entrance, and Inko takes off Izuku's shoes for him and puts them in a cubby off to the side. Usually, Izuku would cling to her leg until she absolutely had to leave, but Mei catches his eye by the Legos, and he runs to her side. Midoriya-san, it's good to see you. Izuku's teacher approaches her, smiling brightly. I missed Izuku while he was sick these last few weeks. Inko forces a smile. Her patience had run dry the day her son had almost wound up in the hospital. Tanaka-sensei, Inko says, forcing a note of pleasantness into her voice as she takes off her shoes. I need to speak with you. Izuku's teacher furrows her brow. Oh, is it about Izuku? Inko nods. Izuku and Katsuki-chan. There was an incident between them that I want you to know about. Tanaka bites her lip and turns. Would you follow me, please? Izuku's teacher takes her to a secluded corner of the classroom, where the two can see all the students in Izuku's class. Inko spots her son quietly building off to the side, alongside Mei. It appears they're having a competition to see who can make a car the fastest. Inko watches Mei pull tiny batteries out of her pocket, handing some to Izuku, and she has to resist a chuckle of amusement. What did you need to talk about, Midoriya-san? Izuku's teacher asks politely, watching the children with soft eyes. Katsuki-chan used his quirk on Izuku. Inko says, her voice low as to not draw the blonde boy's attention. He's on a separate side of the classroom, playing heroes and villains with his friends. Inko swallows. The memory of her son's episode the night before is still fresh. Izuku's face will never look the same. She points to her son jerkily. Katsuki-chan did that. Izuku's teacher gasps and glances at Katsuki, then back to Izuku. She fully takes in the bandages all across his cheeks, the angry red burns creeping across his eyelids, the dried blood in his nose. I'm sure it was an accident, Tanaka says. Katsuki-chan wouldn't do that sort of thing. But even she sounds doubtful. Well, he did. Inko says, her gaze darkened. And I'm going to get one thing straight with you. Keep Katsuki-chan away from my boy. I don't even want them in the same side of the room, because I swear, if he lays another hand on my Izuku, there will be hell to pay. You hear me? She lets the threat hang in the air. Tanaka pales but nods. She runs her fingers through her short hair nervously. I'll be sure to tell his mother. She concedes, looking somewhat like a kicked dog. Good, Inko replies, her lips flattening into a thin line. She brightens again when she goes to kiss Izuku goodbye, knowing that if he's with Mei, then he'll be in good hands. She bends over at his side with a sad smile. Zuku, she whispers, tucking a wayward strand of curly green hair behind his ear. Don't ever let anyone walk all over you, you hear me? Especially Katsuki-chan. Do you understand? Izuku looks up at his mother with a grin. Yup. He says to her, be clutching the all might he'd made out of red and yellow Legos more tightly in his tiny hands. She gives him a kiss on the temple with a murmured, be good, before quietly slipping on her shoes and leaving the kindergarten building behind. Inko sighs as the weight on her shoulders disappeared. She'd probably regret intimidating Izuku's teacher later, but at the time, it had felt right. The summer season was drawing to an end, and for now, her life was finally back onto the right track. She smiles to herself, content to be walking back home to retrieve her car when she hears a child cry out in an alley to her left. Inko stops, concerned. Hello. She calls, almost not daring to go in. Cold, dangerous air flows from it, like the mouth of a monster waiting for its meal to waltz on in. Inko didn't like it one bit. The same voice calls out again, so she steps closer, into the dark, despite her best wishes. She ventures farther, just out of view of the street, and chokes on a scream as a bag is thrown over her head. Her hands pressed into her back. She struggles against massive hands holding her wrists, and her high heels shatter as she jams them into the ground for leverage. She tries to scream but finds her voice is muffled beyond hearing. She claws at her kidnapper's hands with earnest, blood splattering onto the pavement at their feet. The perpetrator doesn't even flinch. She aims a swift kick to the groin, landing it cleanly where she aimed. He keels over, loosening his grip on Inko's wrists, and she yanks herself free, ripping the bag off her head as fast as she could manage. She kicks off her broken heels as she sprints to freedom. Still, she trips over something seemingly invisible at the last second, landing flat on her face and scraping her palms. She can't get up quickly enough. A heavy foot places itself on her back, and Inko struggles to get up, to no avail. She trembles like a bird. "Dean you for making this difficult," her kidnapper huffs, binding her hands behind her. "You're lucky I was ordered not to kill you." Inko's voice is trapped somewhere in her head, obstructed. She can't even cry out. The villain only laughs. The boy is fearless. I feel he won't be easily persuaded. That would be his mother's influence. Dimin her. What should I do, Haika? Do not worry, Ujiko Hakase. I'll have her taken care of. If she's here, she can easily be used to sway the boy's favor. All is not lost yet. You truly do think of everything, Haika. Our partnership will surely be fruitful. Hey, Midoriya-kun, didn't your mom die? Izuku freezes in the middle of packing his bag. He doesn't turn, keeping his head down, and slowly resumes his work. Izuku can feel the other boy's piercing eyes on him, judging him for something he had no control over. Or did he? Oh no, wait. That's not it. She left you, didn't she? She disappeared. Izuku shudders, feeling the tears coming to his eyes of their own volition. His hands are going numb from how hard they clench his backpack. He forces himself to relax, running his aching fingers over the bedsheets he stands in front of. He feels Shinsu's steady presence to his right, grounding him, silently begging him not to start crying. Izuku feels a rough hand grip his shoulder. The quirkless crybaby has nothing to say. That's so weird. The middle schooler Ito laughs in his ear. You're usually a lot of talk for a runt. Izuku grits his teeth and wipes his watering eyes on the short sleeve of his shirt. Shut up, he whispers. Ito, a tall boy with wiry muscles and greasy black hair, only grins, his hold on Izuku's shoulder growing oppressive. Make me, the boy says, and Midoriya can't really blame himself for what happens next. His elbow shoots back in Ito's stomach. The older boy buckles and grunts, reaching forward to grab Izuku by his hair. Izuku darts away, sweeping his leg into Ito's shin as he was off balance. Ito trips with a yelp, his head cracking on the bottom of the upper bunk. Like a wounded beast, he slumps to the floor, groaning and clutching his forehead. When he pulls his hand away, his fingers are coated in crimson, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. A bruise was already beginning to blossom yellow. Everyone in the crowded boys' bunk room is stock still, muttering among themselves, unsure who to root for. Izuku pants, adrenaline buzzing just under his skin. Shinso had stood some time in the middle of the whole debacle, and he looks at Izuku now with his jaw clenched, his eyes wide. When Izuku meets them, Shinso backs away. Ito had been the terror of the boys' home for as long as Izuku could remember, in some ways reminding Izuku of Katsuki, in some ways not. Katsuki had ambition, conviction, and the strength to rise up to a challenge whenever faced with one. Ito was like a wasp, one that stung and stung and stung without reason. He had neither. Midoriya found it hard to truly be afraid of Ito. All Ito could do was hurt his body, and pain was a temporary thing. Ito stumbles to his feet, a low growl building in the back of his throat. You're dead. He hisses, his blood-soaked fingers sparking with yellow energy. I've been wanting to try this on you for a while. He lunges forward, and Izuku turns and tries to run out of the dead end between the bunks and the wall. He wasn't quick enough, or Ito was too close, but his meaty hands clamp around Izuku's neck, strong as a vice. Izuku shrieks as his body completed the circuit. Sparks arc out of his fingertips, the fingertips clawing at his windpipe, flailing his legs as he's lifted off the floor, powerless as a doll. Hitoshi freezes. He is forced to watch as they burn, growing more dead and blackened by the second. Stop. You're hurting him. Shinso yells, his voice shaking, his hands hovering nearby, but he hesitates to reach forward and stop him. Hey, listen to me. Say something. He begs. Instead of answering, Ito laughs. Izuku bares his teeth and meets Shinso's eyes. He smiles, something reassuring. He backs off reluctantly, and Izuku kicks backward with all his weight, missing, but it's enough to throw Ito off balance. Izuku takes the chance to wrench himself out of Ito's grip, stumbling away and leaning up against the nearest bunk, coughing up black smoke. Ito backs away, looking confused and a little wary. You're a monster. Ito spits, the electricity in his palms dimming to tiny sparks. That should have knocked you out or something. What are you? Izuku looks up through his curly hair, wiping his mouth on his shirt sleeve with dark fingers. Smoke drifts out of his nose every time he breathes out. And yet, Izuku keeps grinning unfailingly. It borders on creepy, crooked teeth bared in an alarming resemblance to something unkind. Ito pushes past him and the other boys, his lip curled in hatred. He casts shrewd eyes at Izuku as he passes, checking him with his shoulder. Shinso rushes to Izuku's side as the crowd disperses, grabbing his hands with obvious concern. He brings them up to his face to examine them. They're black. Do you think it's permanent? Like your scar. Izuku runs his fingers over the ridges carved in his face, relieved to know that they still feel. His fingertips sting, not as bad as he thought they should. I don't know. Shinso frowns, releasing Izuku's hands. The Izuku resumes packing his bag, shoving the few things he owns inside, wincing every so often when his fingers drag against the cold zipper. Why aren't you freaking out right now? Didn't that hurt? Shinso queries. Izuku pauses and then keeps going. It did at first. But I guess I didn't care. What do you mean? Shinso sits down on Izuku's bunk, brows furrowed. The doctor said I don't feel burned the same way most do, or something. I don't know. Izuku puts his last shirt into his backpack, sliding the bag under his bed. Are you sure it's not some part of a hidden quirk, and you just never knew? Shinso asks cautiously, knowing he's prodding a sleeping bear, but his curiosity gets the better of him. My quirk didn't come in until I was almost 6. Maybe you're a late bloomer? Midoriya's expression sours, and he plops down onto the bed beside Shinso. Midoriya starts to pick at his blackened fingertips. He swallows. I'm just... That's the right word for it. The purple-haired boy to his left nods solemnly. Yeah. I think so. For a time, the two boys sit in comfortable silence and watch the other boys in the group home ready themselves for bed. Neither of them flinched at the harsh words that were occasionally hurled at them. Ito didn't make another appearance. Izuku, Shinso says after a while. Midoriya looks over at him, cringing. His neck was stiff where he'd been shocked. Yeah. Do you ever think about her? Shinso asks, his voice little more than a whisper. All the time. Midoriya replies quietly. I don't remember her face anymore. But I know some things about who she was. The lights turn out, and Izuku notices that all the other boys are already in bed, and they'll be in trouble if they aren't soon. Do you ever think about your mom? Izuku asks, leaning in like they were sharing a secret. Or your dad? Shinso shakes his head. If my mom wants me back, she can come get me. Shinso hops off Izuku's bunk and shuffles to his own, sliding under the covers with tense, slow movements, his back turned. Living at the boys' home has been difficult, to say the least. Izuku had found solace in Hitoshi and the way he worked hard, holding his hopes high. They both wanted to be heroes. Hitoshi had told him the same, but what Midoriya has planned for later that evening would fully betray his only redeeming quality. He only wishes that Shinso won't be too mad at him. He's sure that he wants to escape too, maybe with someone who's just as hopeful as he is. I need to get away. I can't stay here anymore. Midoriya likes the night. Being wrapped in a cloak of darkness, then he can go where he likes, surround himself in safe loneliness reserved only 10-year-old nobodies. Izuku thinks he's allowed this simple luxury. He's always been a night owl. Tugging the sleeves of a too big black hoodie back from around his freshly bandaged hands, he silently slips his favorite yellow bag over a shoulder. His heart clenches when he remembers who gave it to him. Again, the dam of emotions he'd built over the years creaks, a little bit spilling over. He dismisses the twinge of regret in his gut, focusing on the task at hand. He forces himself to be happy. I'm finally getting out of here, I'm leaving, but the words do nothing to ease the dread that weighs down his feet. He slips out of bed, already fully dressed. It's dark as pitch, but Izuku had long ago memorized the route from his bottom bunk to the window. He listens to the snores and mumbles of the other boys living with him and hears nothing off, taking this chance to grab the sneakers he's left under the bed. He puts them on, feeling a bit off to be wearing them indoors, and stands. He cringes when his bed creaks loudly. Izuku. Someone whispers. Izuku stills. Hitoshi-kun. He murmurs cautiously. In the inkiness of the room, Midoriya can hear the boy in the bed next to him shift. So you were serious? Shinso sighs quietly, and Izuku knows the sadness in his voice. Izuku holds back a frown at his roommate's comment and ignores what he said. Izuku stalks to the nearest window, slowly peeling back the blinds. I'm going now. Maybe I'll see you again when your parents get better. He announces. Midoriya winces when the wood clacks together as he grows hasty. Midoriya hears him grunt non-committally. It'll be lonely without you, you know. Shinso acknowledges after a PRGNT silence. Midoriya hears Shinsu's bed shift again, and then the scuffle of slippers approaching. Who's gonna fix Fujihara's leg now? None of us know how to do it. Midoriya feels someone ruffle his curly hair, and he playfully pushes Shinso away with one hand. Midoriya finally gets the window open, and it slides up with a quiet shwip sound. Light from the street lamp outside casts a yellow glow on their covered feet, and he swings his leg over the edge. I'm sorry, the Izuku murmurs. A cool breeze flows into the room, rippling Izuku's hair like the long green grass they played in after school some days. When he looks back at Shinso, his delicate, childlike features are framed in a halo of amber light. Hitoshi swears he can see sparks flickering in Midoriya's darkened eyes, the warm remnants of a dying fire. He looks away, breaking the eye contact, and Hitoshi suddenly feels cold. Midoriya's voice is hardly more than the quiet whisper of half-terminated sound. I can't stay here. But I promise that when I get into Yui, I'll be the greatest hero, so someday I can take you away from this place. We'll be together again. I know. Shinso mutters. Midoriya reaches out for him with blackened fingers, but Shinso shrugs away. Just go already. I'm sorry, Midoriya echoes, adjusting the straps of the bag on his shoulders. He leans forward just so, lips brushing against Shinso's cheek. Shinso is struck into dumb silence, and Midoriya turns away. He slips out the window and disappears from Hitoshi like the cooling embers of an old flame. Midoriya lands 5 feet below and hisses when a sliver of sharp pain jolts his ankles. He rubs his legs a few times for good measure and straightens. When he looks up at the window again, he can hear it close. Bye, Hitoshi-kun. Thanks for everything. Midoriya whispers and watches as the blinds fall against the glass again, blocking out the view of his old home. He shakes off the guilt clinging to his skin and glances around the surrounding streets cautiously. He picks one to the south to walk down, one that he wasn't very familiar with. Izuku isn't usually one to be superstitious, but today seems as good a night as any. Good luck in new beginnings. I need some of that. Fractured moonlight reflects off the broken glass on the dirty sidewalk, and weeds poke up between the cracks in the sun-bleached concrete. Lining the streets are drag stores and rundown taverns, looted vending machines filling up the bare spaces. Izuku had grown up in this place, spent the worst 5 years of his life here. He was glad to get away, and yet he left his old neighborhood behind slowly. We'll stick through it together, no matter what happens. Midoriya whispered into the darkness, grasping for Shinso's band-aid-covered fingers in the space between their beds. He was relieved when the boy clutched his hand, clinging to it as though Izuku was the last ray of sunlight and Hitoshi's fingertips were starving flower petals. You promise? Shinso murmured. Izuku squeezed his hand with a smile he knew Shinso wouldn't be able to see. I promise. And what happens if someone picks one of us? Shinso replied, his voice detached, trapped in another time. A happier time. Then wherever you go, I'll follow. Best friends for life, right? Through thick and thin. That's what it means. The two sat in each other's company for a few minutes before Shinso squeezed Izuku's hand. We'll be heroes together. Shinso murmured sleepily. Yep, Izuku smiled. Good night. His hands slipped out of Shinso's as they both began to drift off. Good night. The memory gave Izuku pause and the moment he'd previously forgotten nips at his sore ankles. The same night surrounded him now as it did then, reminding him of his oath to Shinso 4 years before when they were only 6. Only now, after Izuku's childhood had been ripped away for the sake of survival, did he know how much those words really cost. Izuku had tried to cut himself off, to stop feeling things. But going from feeling everything to feeling nothing was impossible for the boy. He was naturally very emotional. His mother had been emotional too. Even now, when he was fully aware that this feeling of guilt was wearing him down, he couldn't make himself stop feeling it. Something All Might said once stuck out in his mind. Trust me, it may be tempting to cut yourself off from the world when things get tough, he said, flashing his signature grin and a thumbs up. But things will only get better with the help of loved ones. Those words had been reassuring to a 6-year-old Izuku, who wanted desperately to need and be needed. But now, only 4 years later, he found himself doing precisely what All Might had warned him against. I just want to protect him, Izuku protests weakly inside the constant buzz of his own mind. I hurt everyone I love anyways. The conflict inside his head distracts him from the pain in his feet as he wanders, just putting miles between himself and the boy's home, as many as he can manage. Just as day breaks over the horizon, Izuku comes across an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of downtown Mudafesu. He almost passes it by until he hears a shriek from just inside. He backtracks, looking through a dusty window, and he hears it again. Concerned, he skirts around the edges of the building until he finds a door on the side facing west, into a dirty alley. He notices that the door is unlocked when he jiggles the handle and pulls it open with some difficulty. He slowly tracks his way into the warehouse, dust filling his lungs. He coughs, pulling his t-shirt over his nose. The room he's in right now is filled with rusted machinery and cardboard boxes, so much so that he has to weave and duck. Whoever was last here must have been interrupted while moving all this stuff out, Izuku thinks absently. Izuku listens for a second more until he hears a scrabbling of claws and a quiet wail a few feet in front of him. He spots a closed filing cabinet, tufts of feathers and grass sticking out the top and sides. He approaches cautiously, finding it difficult to navigate around heavy boxes and other debris littered around. When he finally reaches it and crouches in front of it, if he listens carefully, he can hear anguished squawks coming from inside. He slowly pushes in the handle and tugs it open. Izuku peers inside, and he finds himself grinning wider than he had in a long time. Sitting inside a little nest of tinsel and feathers, a tiny crow cries. Izuku picks it up with cupped hands, and the little bird coos, curling into the warmth. Izuku strokes the purple-black feathers on top of its head, giggling when it shrieks at him. "Where's your mom, little guy?" Izuku whispers with a smile. The bird inclines his head at him, confused by his strange tongue. Izuku stands with his in his palm and glances around the room. "You must be like me," he says after a moment, seeing no other birds around, not even a single sparrow. "Your mom must have left after you got locked in there, huh? I wonder if she's looking for you." The bird squawks at him again, opening its bright mouth wide. "Oh," Izuku realizes. "You're hungry." He sets the bird back in its nest and fishes in his backpack for something. "Ha!" He cries jubilantly when his sore fingers catch on a little bag of tuna. He rips it open with his teeth and recoils a bit at the smell, but the baby crow perks up. Izuku grabs a chunk of it and leans over the nest, and the bird hops a little to tear it from his fingers. The tiny thing wolfs it down and shrieks for more. As Izuku feeds the crow, he loses himself in thought. Within minutes, the tuna in the packet disappeared, and Izuku digs through his bag again for more. "I think I know what I'm going to name you," he says quietly. Sunlight finally begins piercing the musty darkness of the warehouse. "Shoki, because you're so hungry." Izuku smiles to himself, thinking his little pun is hilarious. Shoki cries because Izuku has stopped feeding him so he can talk. Izuku resumes his work with the same concentration as before, helping the bird to choke his food down as necessary, just like mama birds do, he thinks proudly. Halfway through the second packet of tuna, Shoki turns her face away and clamps her beak shut like a baby. Izuku laughs and folds the package in half so he can throw it away later, setting it aside. The little crow's eyes begin to droop, and so do Izuku's. The boy unrolls a blanket he has stashed in his bag, laying it out in the cleanish spot beside Shoki's nest. "I'll live here until your mom comes back," Izuku slurs sleepily, wrapping himself up in his oversized hoodie. He drifts off before his head can even hit the floor. "Mama, Mama, help me pick my hero name." Izuku cries, hopping onto the couch beside his mother with glee. The All Might onesie he wears is warm and comforting, smelling faintly of the crisp detergent his mother washes their clothes with. Inko giggles, taking the notebook he holds out in front of him. Inko begins to read it aloud, but her words are distorted, like Izuku's hearing them from the bottom of the bath. "What?" Izuku asks. His mother has gone still. The notebook disappears from her hands as though it had never existed at all. Izuku backs up a bit and finds himself standing. The couch is gone. He's back in the boy's home, but his room is empty of the bunk beds always hemming him in. When Inko turns to Izuku, she's smiling. "Don't worry, Izuku. I'll be back to pick you up in the afternoon. Don't cause any trouble," Izuku's mother says. She's wearing her work clothes, pressed dress pants, and a pale pink blouse, just as Izuku remembers. Her hair is put up in a neat bun, and she looks young, happy. "No, don't go," Izuku cries, jumping forward, but his limbs move in slow motion. He feels as though he's running through molasses, despair coursing through him as his mother turns away, evaporating into a shower of sakura petals that rain down on Izuku. Izuku stops dead, and the scene melts away. It's April, and a breeze makes the sakura drift through the air and spread its sweet perfume. The cool wind pierces his suit blazer easily, and he finds himself shivering. Someone places a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and Izuku already knows who it is. He refuses to look at him. "I'm sorry about your mother, Midoriya-kun. This last year must have been hard on you." Detective Tsukachi murmurs. He sounds genuinely sad. "She's not dead. You have no proof." Izuku retorts. His left hand clings to the ends of his shirt, which he'd untucked in defiance of his well-meaning grandmother. His other clutched his all-might figurine. The funeral had been small, as Midoriya Inko had so little family and only so many friends. Bakuga Mitsuki and her son, Katsuki, had come at one point but didn't stay for the burial of Inko's empty casket. Eventually, even Hatsune Megumi had to leave, hugging Izuku goodbye with tears in her eyes. Tsukachi sighs. He's already argued with Izuku on this, and Izuku can tell he no longer cares for the conversation. "I'm here to take you back to the boys' home. None of your relatives could take you in. I tried to reason with them, but—" Izuku rubs his arm across his face and sniffles, but his following words come out stiff and angry. "They don't want a quirkless boy." The silence from Tsukachi is telling enough. Let's go. Someone will be checking in with you in a couple weeks to see how you're settling." Before Izuku can be led away, the boy dashes to his mother's fresh grave, setting his toy on the marker. "All Might will bring you home one day," Izuku whispers. He says that no one who needs him will be ignored. In the background, a bird is squawking rather loudly. When Izuku turns to find it, the dream fizzles away in a haze of pink and yellow. Izuku's body slogs into wakefulness slowly, then all at once, when he realizes who was squawking in his dream. Shoki flaps his half-molted wings, stirring up dust and feathers. Izuku sits up, stretching, late afternoon light filters through the frosted windows. He wipes the sleep from his eyes and digs in his backpack for more tuna. "Sorry, Shoki," Izuku murmurs, "but this is all I really have, unless you like granola bars or canned peaches." He opens the pack, and Shoki eats it just as readily as before. While Shoki nibbles on the tuna, Izuku rambles on about everything and nothing. "And I've got some money saved up from helping Adachi-sensei clean up her shop, so now I can buy more food for the both of us. Do you like katsudon?" Shoki looks up at Izuku and croaks quietly, nipping at his finger in a way that the boy takes to be affectionate. Izuku feeds the crow the rest of the tuna in the packet and scoops her up in his palms. The shirt underneath his hoodie has a pocket on the chest, which Izuku securely puts Shoki in. "Ready to go?" Izuku smiles at the bird, holding his hoodie away from his body so he can see it. Shoki chirps at him and curls into Izuku's warmth, closing his eyes. Izuku slings his yellow backpack over his shoulder and weaves his way through the piles of boxes, going out the same way he came in. "I'll have to look through these," Izuku thinks to himself, dragging his finger through the dust layered on their soggy cardboard. Izuku walks down the close to empty streets of Mizu, only passing by the occasional salaryman. He remembers spotting a small grocery store down the road from the warehouse he'd decided to settle in and takes his time walking there. It's a nice day, a warm breeze ruffles his hair, he hardly needs his hoodie, but he feels exposed when he takes it off. When Izuku passes by a playground, a sniffle makes him pause. He almost shrugs his shoulders and continues when a voice calls out to him. "Hey, I know you." Izuku stops dead and turns to the speaker. He finds the boy, about his age, sitting on a bench towards the back of the playground. Izuku wouldn't have noticed him if he hadn't said anything. "You do?" Izuku asks. The boy looks up, no longer hiding his face behind dual-colored hair. Even from several yards away, Izuku can see the metal plate covering his left eye socket and how his bionic eye flickers. "Yeah, I've seen you before. But not with that scar on your face," the boy says, and Izuku can't bring himself to mind how brazen he is. Izuku walks over to him and sits beside the boy on the bench. It's a good spot. The waning sunlight falls onto it in just the right way to warm his skin. The boy seems a little awkward about it, as though unsure how to start a conversation, so Izuku takes the reins. "Something's wrong with your eye," Izuku says frankly with a tilt of his head. The boy's face pales. "You noticed?" Izuku smiles a little, and Shoki shifts inside his shirt. "It's turning on and off. I can fix it if you want me to." The dual-haired boy swallows and seems to consider it before he nods. Izuku grins. He swings his backpack off his shoulder and begins to dig through it. He comes out with a tiny screwdriver. "I'm going to need you to hold as still as you can," he says. Shudo nods solemnly. "All right." Izuku ends up leaning really closely into his personal space, so he tries to chat amicably to ease the tension in the boy's shoulders. "Your eye is really cool," Izuku murmurs, bringing his screwdriver to the tiny screw holding the plate to the boy's face. "I'm going to have to take his eye all the way out to fix the internal hardware. I hope he doesn't mind. I'm Midoriya Izuku, by the way." The boy stiffens and glances at Izuku's scar, and then at his eyes, and then at his hair. After a moment, he relaxes again, but he has a different energy about him now. "Todoroki," he replies, his voice a shade softer than before. Izuku smiles, and he catches the first screw in his palm. "Nice to meet you, Todoroki-kun." After that, Izuku finds it challenging to carry on a conversation as he focuses on his work. After he gets out all the screws, he pauses for a second to warn Todoroki. "This gonna feel a little odd," he says. Todoroki nods, and Izuku gently tugs the tech out of its socket with a gentle pop. Todoroki blinks as the eye flickers off, the iris turning from a vibrant blue to a dull gray, the white of his eye falling to black. "That was weird," Todoroki says, staring down at it, his voice almost entirely devoid of emotion. The wires that attach his bionic eye to his head hang between them, and Izuku fights the urge to laugh. "I would have thought you'd have been more freaked out." Izuku chuckles, turning the machine in his hands over and finding the chip he was looking for hidden in its backside. Todoroki watches Izuku, enraptured, as he gently pulls it out and reinserts it. He presses a tiny button on the side and begins the delicate work of putting Todoroki's eye back in. The two are entirely silent, save for their breathing, as Izuku finishes tightening the final screw. Then, with a pop just like the first, Todoroki's eye boots up again, resuming its turquoise color. The dual-toned boy blinks a few times and cracks a gentle smile. Izuku thinks it looks nice on him. "Thanks," Todoroki murmurs. "It's really no problem. It was such a simple fix, and I didn't want to leave you with your eye constantly rebooting." Izuku grins bashfully, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's something a hero would do," Todoroki says, looking away from Izuku to the streets just beyond the playground they're sat behind. Izuku stills, his heart dropping to his feet. "I'm no hero," he says quietly, and the atmosphere changes. "Why not?" Todoroki asks, and Izuku has to stop and think for a moment. He considers telling Todoroki about his lack of a quirk. He shakes his head. "I just can't be, not yet," he says finally, after a long moment. "You still really haven't answered my question, though." Todoroki presses, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Are you really going to make me say it?" Izuku says, his voice subdued. "I think you already know why. You seem like the type. You don't need some fancy quirk to be a hero," Todoroki says after a long moment. "Fancy quirks can only get you so far. You want to help people, so you're already more of a hero than half the people I know." Izuku decides not to comment on that and hums. It's at that moment that Shoki decides she's hungry again. She squawks inside Izuku's shirt, and Izuku is jolted out of the content moment he'd been having. "Shoot," he sighs. Todoroki looks at him, puzzled. "What was that?" Todoroki asks. Izuku jumps up, patting the left side of his chest to quiet Shoki. "My bird. I've got to go, maybe I'll see you around?" Izuku says quickly, already beginning to jog away. "Bye, Todoroki-kun." Todoroki can only stare after him in dumb silence as he turns a corner and disappears from his vision. The boy sighs in defeat. Until next time. he murmurs, his forehead still twinging from how hard his father had smacked him a little bit ago before he'd ran off. Reports of an armed robbery on 45th and 7th, requesting immediate hero assistance. I repeat, armed robbery on 45th and 7th, villain name, Anarxis. Immediate hero assistance needed. Izuku tunes out the police chatter after a moment to collect his thoughts. Shoki squawks at his side, nipping his hand in a way that says, "You know exactly who's going to be there and you need to get a move on." Izuku sighs and casts his eyes out to the landscape before him. It's night in Mizudafu, the city lights shine in bright hues of purple, and the sky is the clearest Izuku has seen it since early December. A perfect night for villainy, Izuku thinks to himself. He uncrosses his legs and rises to his feet, his ankles stiff. Even though he stands on a ledge, inches away from falling to his untimely death, heights haven't scared him since he first started out. He relishes the cold air that ripples through his thick hair. Izuku sighs. "You're right, Shoki." Izuku leans down to slide the pretty bird's chin. "If Orc is still holding that grudge, I should probably go." Izuku rummages in the pocket of his hoodie, slipping the iconic medical mask over his ears with blackened fingers. He turns to Shoki again, who looks up at him with a tilted head. "Can you check it out for me?" Shoki squawks, and with a mighty flap of her wings, takes off into the night. Izuku watches her go. After a moment, he reaches into one of the pockets in his utility belt, pulling out a new pair of surgical gloves. Izuku used to only wear gloves to hide his dark fingers, and when Mei asked, he told her that he uses them to conceal his identity, which is partly true, but the fact is that his hands feel naked without them to hide behind. Izuku turns away from the wall that faces the street and gets a running start. He leaps with practiced ease to the next warehouse, the distance so short that he doesn't need to roll. He sprints to the other side, swinging his legs over the ledge and dropping down onto the building on its left. Underneath the mask, he's grinning so wide that his scar twinges. Even though he follows this route nearly every night, the speed and exhilaration of jumping from rooftop to rooftop still fill him with joy. His footsteps are almost entirely silent as he slinks like a sure-footed mouse, save for the occasional skid of his feet dragging on gravel or dirt. 45th and 7th, Izuku murmurs, grunting as his ankle rolls a bit when he lands his last jump, and Izuku is forced to slow down. He pauses to catch his breath and turns when he hears a near-silent flap of wings. He outstretches his right arm, and Shoki lands gracefully, barely stirring a feather. She shuffles down the sleeves of his purple hoodie, nipping at his thumb. Izuku flips his hand, and the crow drops a small compressor into his palm. "God damn it," Izuku growls, and Shoki lets out a series of pleased caws that sounds suspiciously like laughing, her head tilted back. Izuku lets the compressor fall through his fingers onto the grimy roof he stands on. "Yeah, you think it's funny, but you've never had to rebuild somebody's arm 3 times in the same month." Izuku strokes her back feathers, scratching behind her shoulder blades, and the crow coos. "At least he tips enough to keep us fed," Izuku mumbles to himself. Shoki shambles up his arm and perched on his shoulder, nipping at his ear. Izuku swats at her gently and grumbles, all right, I get it, let's keep moving." Shoki takes off and flies a little ahead, never too far to lose sight of Midoriya as he resumes the grueling task of hanging from ledges and hopping massive divides. As he draws closer to the street in question, he hears sirens, the sound of radios, people yelling and talking and moving around. Shoki slows, flying around to land on his shoulder again, and Izuku creeps to the edge of a warehouse overlooking the street. Below, he spots police tape surrounding a jewelry store, windows smashed in, glass littering the ground around it. Izuku can clearly see collapsed walls and broken display cases lying inside. The fluorescent light beaming out of the building filters through bloody shards, making the entire scene slightly more sinister. A few pro-heroes Izuku recognizes are milling about, one of them being the Endeavor. Dislike curls up in Izuku's gut at the thought that the hero had some involvement in this. Whatever had happened here must have been big if it attracted Endeavor, of all heroes. Izuku hisses sarcastically. "Gods, I hate that guy." Shoki flutters her wings in what Izuku takes to be an agreement. Izuku is glad that it's dark out, or he probably would have been spotted by this point, and he listens carefully to hear what the pros have to say. You have a Narcissus in custody, correct? Endeavor says disdainfully. He stands a floor below Izuku, talking to one of his sidekicks, a sprightly young lady that the boy doesn't recognize. Yes, sir. We just handed him over to the police. But the vigilante that intervened got away. The girl says, her long blonde hair bobbing as she relays the information, arms folded formally behind her back. Izuku sits up straighter. Endeavor growls in the back of his throat. Of course, that slimy eel, hopefully, the other one will be on his trail. Do you have an idea where he went? The sidekick nods. He started heading south as soon as we showed up. He can't have gotten far, he was injured. Endeavor grunts, pleased, and he stands up a little straighter. Hunt, aim to capture his accomplice first. The vigilante will be easy pickings without the Hakase to fix him up again. Accomplice, Izuku scoffs silently. I'm no one's accomplice. Endeavor's sidekick salutes the man so hard Midoriya wonders how she hasn't pulled a muscle yet. She runs off in another direction towards the other pros, chatting amicably with the police officers who stayed behind to get their statements. Endeavor stays behind, brooding. The underground comes down tonight, he mutters, just barely loud enough for Izuku to hear if he strains. Izuku decides he's heard enough. He stands and brushes off his knees. So they think they can take me out? He mumbles to himself. Shoki's feathers ruffle, and she takes off into the night, beginning to scout without Izuku even asking her to. I'd like to see them try. Izuku grins and vaults off the warehouse onto the one adjacent. Again, Izuku is reminded of how much it pays to wear dark colors because he isn't seen. Endeavor's sidekicks get going half as quickly as they should, believing their prey injured in an alley somewhere close by. Izuku knows that's probably not far from the truth, but Orc is a tough guy. He can probably get out of this close scrape on his own, but eventually, he'll have to come back to Izuku to get himself fixed up again. The two vigilantes haven't officially teamed up, but Izuku has been seen dragging him away so many times that everyone assumes they have. On exclusive online forums, yeah, maybe Izuku searches his name sometimes, but it's for research purposes only. They're often paired together, but Izuku's pleased to see that they're both becoming standalone acts, slowly but surely. Pictures of Izuku quickly patching up injured vigilantes, heroes, and civilians circulate through these sites, praising him for his intellect and talent for repairing biotech. Some say he's just a straight-up badass, with his mask and calm composure in the face of danger. The local media calls him Hakase or the Doctor, and Izuku's become quite attached to the name. Following his gut, Izuku veers left and heads southward through some more secluded alleys. But, mile away from the crime scene, Shoki catches up with Izuku again. She grabs at his hood with her claws and tries to drag him down. Izuku follows her lead, bracing himself on a bare telephone pole and slipping down the wall with practiced ease. Hakase! Orc calls from down the alley, hidden in darkness, his rough voice thick with pain. How the hell do you always find me? Izuku approaches slowly, pressing a hidden button in his mask that deepens his voice the next time he speaks. Intuition, I guess. Hold still so I can access how much damage you've taken. Orc grunts. When Izuku finally catches sight of the vigilante, he hisses in a breath through his teeth. Orc's spandex face mask is torn, revealing thick brown hair and a single blue eye, a cut from his hairline dripping blood into his eyebrow. He clutches his right arm, which is a torn and twisted mess of metal and wiring that sparks every so often. The man grits his teeth, his breathing heavy. Izuku rushes forward, grabbing a small electric saw and a screwdriver from his utility pack. Orc grimaces in pain when Izuku tries to sit him more upright and lean him against a wall. Did a Narcissus hurt you anywhere else, or is it just the pain sim in your right? Izuku asks, his voice uncharacteristically concerned, as he examines the arm with the trained hands of a professional. If I didn't know you better, Hakase, I'd say you were worried for me, Orc jokes, but he winces when Izuku pokes an exposed clump of wiring with a gloved thumb. Yeah, he breathes, it's just the arm and maybe a bruised rib. Sorry, Izuku mutters, tearing off the rest of the vigilante's sleeve. I'm gonna have to take the whole arm, it's too damaged to fix here and the pros are on our trail. He chews at his lip. What the hell happened anyway? Orc sighs, and Izuku brings the handheld saw to the man's crumpled shoulder with a loud, angry buzzing sound. I cornered Anarxis when he tried to rob another jewelry store. I could have left him be, Toyota-san was right behind me and probably would have done a better job of it, but I couldn't just. Revenge isn't simple, Izuku says gently when Orc drifts off, bringing in the flathead screwdriver to give himself a little leverage as he pries away a plate of twisted metal. Even with my past, I just never felt the need for it. Enduring it was easier. But I see where you're coming from, Orc. Izuku lifts away a large green chip, ripping out the wires attached, and Orc sighs with relief as the pain evaporates. Better? Izuku asks, the arm coming away from Orc a bit, giving Izuku room to go in with a wire cutter and sever it completely. Loads. Orc groans, wiping away the sweat that had beaded on his forehead. He moves to stand when Izuku finishes, swaying on his feet a little but generally seeming all right. You know, Hawkase, you know so much about me, but I know practically nothing about you. He frowns, resting his free hand on his hip. It bothers me. I still have no idea what your motivations are, and I've worked with you for more than a year now. Izuku pulls out the emergency knapsack that usually stays folded up in his utility belt and shoves the arm ungracefully inside. I want to help people, he says finally. It's a general enough explanation, but it doesn't satisfy Orc. Yeah, so do I. But there's always something more. For heroes, it's usually money or fame. But you have neither of those. So what's your reason? Why are you a vigilante, of all things, when you can, I don't know, work for a support company and make 6 figures easy? Izuku grunts and stands, brushing off his sweatpants. Since I was really young, I've wanted to be a hero. It was just the only thing I could ever picture myself doing. It was the only thing that seemed right to me. He turns away towards the wet purple sheen of the empty street. But everyone told me I couldn't, so now I'm here, making myself a hero on my own terms. I'm doing it for Mom. I have to be strong for Mom. So you're doing it out of spite? He chuckles. I thought you were above that kind of thing. You could say that. He hops and grabs the final rung of a low-hanging fire escape ladder, using the wall as leverage to haul his body up onto it. But we should both scram right about now. Endeavor's sidekicks are right on our trails, last time I checked. Orc looks up at him and nods. I'll see you around. Same place as always. Izuku smiles underneath his mask. Yep. He says, popping the P. He disappears onto the roof of the building, and Orc heads off on his own way, no longer hindered by a crippled arm. Yes, I know. The security footage was corrupted before you could retrieve it, right? Damn it. Shudo hovers behind the door to his father's office, listening carefully to every word, hoping to catch any glimmer of intel he could. Usually, Shudo was far and above eavesdropping on Endeavor, but this time was an auspicious case. I'll have my sidekicks keep a diligent watch over the construction district of southwest Mizudafu. The Hawkase won't escape us again, and when I catch him, that little underground thing he is going on will crumble. He's the only thing keeping half of the rats in Tokyo alive. Shudo huffs and turns away from the door. That was all I needed. He pads quietly to his room down the hall, his socked feet barely scuffing the floor. He slides the door open, closing it silently behind him. His disguise is laid out on the futon, a backpack beside it, ready for him to leave. All he needed was an area. The info he found online hadn't been very telling. On the wall opposite, all his hard work is laid out before him in a patchwork of screenshots, police reports, newspaper articles, and photos, all connected together with red twine. In the center of it all is the Hawkase, the boy he'd been hunting down since his debut a year ago. Shudo had been 13. His obsession with the vigilante had started innocently when he'd caught a glimpse of one of his father's reports laid out on the kitchen table. Attached was a grainy picture from a security camera, but Shudo could still see the dark curls poking out from under his black hood, a medical mask barely covering the top of an extensive facial scar. After that, it was only a matter of time before Shudo began to connect the dots, and nearly all of the free time he was allowed was spent researching vigilantes, their behavior, their motivations, how they move, how they avoid getting caught. He wanted to find him. He needed to meet him, and finally, after months of skinning up to his dad and endlessly digging through the internet, he could say he has. Shuto unpins the centerpiece, turning it over in his fingers. It's his favorite photo of Hakase, and it had been taken relatively recently. It meant more to him, though, because he was the one who'd taken it. The Hakase kneels among the block-wide wreckage of a quirk gone rogue, the look on his face kind behind a surgical mask. His green eyes flashed with determination as he fixed the mangled legs of a girl he'd pulled from a car wreck. Her cuts had been attended to, and the tear tracks on her face had been wiped away. Shuto remembers listening to Hakase ramble onto the girl about a dog he'd seen the other day to try and lift her spirits. In the photo, she's smiling, and the way Hakase's eyes scrunch up tells Shuto that he is too. Shuto remembers every detail, how close he'd been, how the Hakase glanced at him out of the corner of his eye and waved. Despite being behind the police tape, Shuto felt strangely close to him that day instead of viewing it from behind the police tape. Shuto slips the photo in the pocket of his hoodie for safekeeping. Shuto picks up a kabuki mask from his bed, slips the strap over his ears, and then slicks his hair back and digs in his bag for a hairnet. He puts that on too, which is no small feat. He's never done anything like this before, and then a wig of fine black hair. When Shuto glances at himself in the mirror, he's satisfied to see that he doesn't even look remotely like who he actually is anymore. He even seems a little intimidating. He hopes that Hakase will appreciate that. Todoroki slips out his bedroom window and into the courtyard beyond, anticipation gnawing at him. Midoriya pushes open the door to his warehouse, drinking in the familiar smell of home. The green-haired boy kicks off his shoes, picking up his lantern from the floor and flicking it on. Midoriya slings the bag with Orc's arm in it off by the door. Shoki hops off his shoulder and glides to her filing cabinet, beside Midoriya's futon, on one far wall of the room. "Do you think it's too early for bed?" he asks her as she settles into her nest, pulling a ratty baby blanket over her wings. "It's only midnight." She caws at him non-committally and goes still. Izuku shrugs. "I still need to eat, and I can probably work on Orc's arm a little bit before going to sleep." Izuku walks across the room by the window and sets his lantern down below it. He finds his generator on the floor and fills it up with fresh gas, tugging on the starter until it revs up to life. His microwave begins to beep as it's filled with power. Midoriya grabs a packet of ramen alongside a bowl beside the microwave, ripping the package open with his teeth and dropping the noodles into the bowl. He adds water from a bottle and puts it in the microwave to cook. He sighs as his limbs grow heavy with the thought of sleep. "I still have so much to do," Midoriya yawns. "And it's already Friday." Midoriya jolts awake when he hears something crash through a window on one of the upper decks. Shoki squawks in alarm and flaps her wings, and Midoriya raises a finger to his lips in a silent gesture to be quiet. He slips his mask out of his pocket and secures it on his face, reaching around blindly for his staff, which he finds lying on the ground nearby. Izuku flicks off the lantern, plunging the surrounding area into darkness, dim moonlight flickering through the windows when it's not interrupted by passing cars. Midoriya can hear whoever it is stumbling around, cursing under their breath. Izuku knows this place like the back of his hand. Hell, he'd trained for this exact moment and quickly found the stairs up. When it came to intruders, they were usually few and far between. For the most part, the only people that ever stumbled into his home were the homeless, of which he usually felt guilty about driving out but had an easy time of. Once, an ordinary policeman had broken into his place, and thankfully he hadn't been spotted. After that, he started investigating situations like these with the lights out, so his face was never spotted, and nothing could be used to distinguish this place from any other empty warehouse. He follows his ears, his left hand tracing the handrail, feeling the vibrations of the intruder's footsteps on his bare feet. He reaches the top and senses his opponent a few feet ahead, and he lunges forward with his staff. They fall backward with a grunt, hissing as the air is knocked out of them. Izuku places his foot on their chest to keep them down, starting when a hand clasps around his ankle and something freezing cold climbs up his calf. Izuku finds their neck with his staff and presses down, a warning. To Midoriya's left, Shoki lands on the rail, her talons clacking. Who do you work for and how did you find me? Izuku hisses, and the intruder wheezes. Izuku lifts the staff enough for them to breathe. I work for no one, he coughs. His voice is firm but still young. Midoriya would guess that they're about the same age, if not a bit older. Then how did you find me? What? If you're looking for a commission, I do all my organizing through the web. Izuku asks, pressing his foot down a little harder when the boy is silent. I've been tracking you since your debut last December. And I have good intel. Shudo says, quiet and possibly scared. I wanted to find you because... He swallows. I admire you. What? Izuku asks, dumbfounded. He lifts his foot off the boy's chest, and Todoroki struggles to stand, coughing gently. Watching you helping people, it inspired me. It inspired a lot of people. Shudo pauses as if working up the courage for something big. I was hoping that finding your base would impress you, but now. I don't know. Midoriya shakes his head in disbelief. The truth was, if this was just some obsessed fan, he's astounded by the amount of effort he put into tracking him down. But despite that, he feels edgy because what exactly is this guy capable of? You're right on that part, Izuku confirms. He taps his staff on the metal floor. He tilts his head, thoughtful. So what is it that you want exactly? Something tells me you don't just break into known criminals' bases for the fun of it. The boy across from him swallows. I want to work with you. I want to be your sidekick, or something. Midoriya freezes. That was not at all what he had been expecting. He thinks it over, but the urge to invite the boy into this world is overwhelming, not when he can be an excellent ally if he's as intelligent as he seems. A small, paranoid part of him whispers, spy, spy. He chews his lip. I'll have to test him. Okay. He says cautiously. Shudo sputters. Really? He asks incredulously. Izuku nods and then remembers that Todoroki can't see him. Yep, he replies easily. But we're going to spar first. I want to see what you're made of. Izuku turns and walks down the stairs, snickering while he listens to Shudo fumble around behind him. He flicks the lantern back on and takes his ramen out of the microwave. He watches Todoroki descend the final few steps and glance around, astounded by the sheer amount of stuff in the room. Do you live here? He asks, bewildered. Izuku frowns and picks up a sizable amount of noodles with his chopsticks. If you don't like it, you can go. Shudo shakes his head. I don't mind it. I just expected tidiness from someone who calls themselves doctor. Izuku blushes minutely but doesn't comment. Izuku notes the kitsune kabuki mask. It appeared well made, more than some average schoolboy could probably afford with his allowance, even if he saved. Todoroki is taller than him by 4 or 5 inches and well-muscled, judging by how his t-shirt stretches across his chest. He wears a hoodie, much like Izuku's, but his is unzipped and a marine blue. The idea that he's some trained operative seems more plausible now, but his carefully curated identity leads everyone to believe he was an adult. Why would they send a kid after me if they think I'm older? He wonders. Shut up, stupid. He tells the loud part of his brain. Shudo stands by the stairs, unsure. Izuku gestures him forward, setting aside his already half-eaten ramen. Shudo jumps when Shoki lands on Izuku's shoulder like a living shadow. What is that? He asks as he slowly approaches. Oh, her. Izuku grins, stretching, and his shoulder pops. This is Shoki. Shoki squawks as she's jolted and flies off into the dark, presumably to find somewhere to watch from afar. Todoroki opens his mouth to say something but clamps it firmly shut after a moment of deliberation. Izuku stands and shrugs off his hoodie and gloves. He leaves the mask on, deciding that the boy isn't worth exposing himself to yet. Following his lead, Todoroki takes off his jacket and drops it on the floor. Midoriya swallows when he sees just how fit the guy actually is. You've got a lot of muscle for a student, Midoriya remarks aloud, wondering if he might actually give him a run for his money. Shudo grunts, his shoulders tensing with surprise. I train all day. I should hope so. Midoriya nods, finding the roll of tape on the microwave and taping his knuckles. He might actually be helpful? That's a thought. You know, I never caught your name. Midoriya tries to bridge the conversation. He wants to know about this guy as much as possible before they actually spar. Todoroki blanks. You don't have one yet? The masked boy nods slowly. Never really thought I'd get this far. Midoriya grins and tosses the tape to him. That's all right. You can decide after I beat your butt. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Shudo says, his lips just barely quirking up at the corners. Midoriya grins wider. So far, he'd gotten the impression that this guy was all nerves hidden under stoic coolness. This was a change of pace. But I think I want to be Cory. For now. Ice. Midoriya asks, squaring his fists. That explains why my pant leg is soaked. All right, Cory. I'm sure you know what you're doing. Todoroki nods and moves to the center of the room, which is, mostly, clear. The two bow to each other and then drop into battle stances. Todoroki is the first to move, lunging forward with a heavy swing. Midoriya smoothly ducks and sidesteps, kicking him backward a few steps. Todoroki takes it in stride, and the two go back and forth like that, coming in close and darting back. Midoriya carefully watches for openings. The next time Todoroki goes to clock him in the chin to end the match, Izuku grabs his bicep and wrist and tosses him over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Todoroki hits the ground, hard, air rushing out of his lungs. Midoriya plants a knee on his chest and holds down one of his wrists. Both of their chests heave, and a fine sheen of sweat has formed on Todoroki's forehead. Melted ice soaks Izuku's sock, making him shiver. You fight like I'm twice your size, Midoriya critiques, wiping his hand on his forehead with a pleased grin. We'll have to work on that. The good thing is you actually made me sweat. Can't say that happens often. He unpins Shudo, and the boy sits up quickly. Does that mean I can work with you? He asks, and Izuku could tell he was trying to tamp down his excitement and apprehension. Midoriya peels the tape off his hands slowly, thinking. Shoki still needs to approve. He says finally, walking over to the filing cabinet next to his futon. The crow? Shudo asks, bewildered. He follows a few paces behind, peering over Izuku's shoulder. She's smarter than you'd think. It's her quirk. Izuku explains, and he slowly peels the little blanket off her torso. Hey Shoki. Wake up for a minute. Quirk. Shudo echoes, sounding lost to the point of despair. Izuku taps the bird on the beak, and she nips at him before lazily standing on tired legs and stepping up onto his outstretched hand. He lifts her up to Shudo's height. Shudo backs up slightly as she leans in with a critical eye, hopping onto his shoulder to examine him further. After a moment of prodding his hair and staring, she deems him worthy and settles on his left shoulder with a pleased coo. Midoriya chuckles. She likes you, Cory. Shudo gulps, not sure what to do about the bird sitting on him. I couldn't tell. Midoriya grins, his eyes wrinkling at the corners, and Todoroki finds his breath catching in his throat. I can't tell if he is scary or adorable. Maybe both? After a quiet moment, Todoroki begins to slide Shoki's back feathers, and she makes a noise that sounds suspiciously like purring. She looks at Midoriya in a way that says, he better be coming back. Cory, Midoriya says. I want to know more about you. Shudo's hand stills. Me? Hiss. Shoki nips at his pinky until he scratches the spot behind her wings again. I mean, we're probably going to be spending a lot of time together for a while, Izuku murmurs, watching Todoroki's hands. If we know each other well, then that translates better into our work. Todoroki nods minutely. He doesn't know how to say, I'm only doing this. Because we met a couple of times as kids, and you're too interesting to forget, so he just agrees. Midoriya hooks him by the elbow and drags him to a low table by the microwave, where Midoriya's almost cold ramen sits. The two boys plop down on the work tatami mats but don't know what to say. It's awkward to say the least. Shoki flops into Todoroki's lap, leaning heavily on his left side with the bird equivalent of a sigh. She really seems to like you, Midoriya murmurs, dragging the bowl closer and picking up his chopsticks again. She hardly ever does that with me. He lifts the bottom of his mask with one hand, careful not to reveal too much of his face. He catches Todoroki pointedly avoiding looking at him. I've been told I'm a warm person, Todoroki says quietly, scratching at the nape of Shoki's neck. Midoriya snickers through a mouthful of noodles. Warm? Isn't your quirk ice? Todoroki's ears go red. Sorry about freezing your leg. Midoriya shakes his head. Don't worry about it. I needed to wake up anyways. Todoroki stays silent, and Izuku takes the opportunity to finish his ramen. He pushes it aside and folds his dark fingers on the table. I'm just wondering, how the hell did you find me? For real? Todoroki looks pinned, and he fidgets with Shoki's back feathers. We've met before. When I was a kid. I remember you coming from this direction, and after the incident from earlier this night, I followed my gut instinct here. You kind of broke into all the abandoned buildings on this part of Mizutofu until I found you. Midoriya feels his stomach drop. We've met. Does that mean that he already knows who I am? How did he know that I lived somewhere abandoned? Is he a spy? Todoroki senses a change in atmosphere and seems to grow colder, still unsure if what he did was really okay or not. Cool. Midoriya mumbles, overwhelmed. He plays with the strings of his hoodie absent-mindedly. That's a lot of dedication. Todoroki looks at Midoriya as if he's grown a third head. You don't think that's weird? Midoriya laughs. No, it's definitely weird, that's just... I do that sort of stuff all the time. I'm a vigilante, it's sort of in the job description to be a little crazy, or else we'd all already be heroes or civilians. His voice drifts off. Do you want to be a hero? Todoroki murmurs. He stares at Izuku, an emotion he can't identify sitting right under the surface. Their eyes meet, too intense for either to maintain. Of course, I'm trying for Yui next January. He breathes quietly, subdued, staring away. I think our society needs improving. I want to change the ways heroes are now, cesspools of corruption. I want to save all the people who are ignored. He hates to admit that his hands shake. Does that make us rivals as well as partners, then? Shudo asks, stilling his hands when Shoki closes her eyes in sleep. When Midoriya realizes what this means, he finds a smile tugging at his lips. I guess it does. When Izuku shuts his door for the last time that night, he leans against it and lets out the breath he'd been holding. He'd just finished setting up a time for them to meet again, which would most likely be the next night if Shudo could get away. Shoki, Midoriya sighs, stumbling over to collapse into his futon, tugging a fleece blanket over his legs. What am I getting myself into? He flicks off the lantern, and the warehouse is plunged into darkness. Shoki doesn't stir, so Izuku closes his eyes. Outside, snowflakes the color of amber, dyed by the streetlights, flicker over the windows. The smell of early morning air hits Midoriya's nose as he gets off the train. Wind buffets any skin not covered by his uniform, leaving him aching for a mask and gloves. A sakura petal floats past his nose, and he looks down the open-air station, surrounded by cherry trees just coming into bloom. It's the height of spring, the most beautiful time of year. He was supposed to be enjoying it. Businessmen and other students breeze past, no worries past the shallow, but Midoriya can't pull himself out of this overbearing moment. Every spring it hurts. Midoriya is familiar with loss. He's known it before, but his mother had always been his most tender memory. He hadn't believed she was gone for a long time. The funeral they held in her honor was only to put his relatives' hearts at ease, if they had cared at all for her. But with every passing year, when the trees had shed all the pink on their branches, it was harder and harder to shake off the creeping doubt. He found the pain almost manageable at the end of every April. Izuku was okay. He wouldn't ruin things if he could just make it to May when the trees had leaves again, and he could breathe without the scent of fresh flowers and cold air. Isn't spring the best, Izuku? It's so fresh, perfect for new beginnings, right? Kori can never know how much April kills Izuku. Shudo has been training under him for a little under 2 months, and Izuku usually enjoyed his steady presence and silent encouragement. He was a good guy if he could get past his inability to start a conversation. But Izuku couldn't deal with him today, not when his eyes burned, because of allergies, he assures himself. Heroes don't cry for anything else. He wipes away the traitorous tears with the sleeve of his dark uniform. Izuku feels for his phone in the pocket of his pants and considers texting Kori that he can't make it to dinner that night, but he had made a promise. The younger Izuku would have cancelled in a heartbeat, but Izuku was more reluctant to break promises as deftly as mirrors these days. Midoriya takes a deep breath, shoulders his old yellow backpack, and sets out for Aldra Junior High, the only remnant of his old life lying just inside. Leaving the station, Izuku steps onto the street and trips, falling to the ground as a force smashes into the pavement right where he'd been standing less than a minute before. He yelps, hot panic skipping about in his chest. Izuku scrambles away on his hands and knees, glancing over his shoulder as he joins the crowd of people who'd gathered to watch nearby. A massive villain, is he a transformative type? Begins to rampage, bringing parts of the station down around his feet. Izuku slings off his bag, reaching inside for a notebook and pen. He frantically starts taking notes, mumbling under his breath. Never miss an opportunity to learn from others, Izuku thinks to himself. Strangers give him odd looks, and only one comments an aside. The villain is quickly subdued by a pro making her debut, stealing the spotlight from one of Izuku's favorite up-and-coming heroes, Kamui Woods. Although her quirk is relatively common, Izuku dedicates a page to her hero name anyway. He leaves the busy scene, knowing that if he runs, he won't be late for school, but at the moment, Izuku finds it hard to care. Another flower petal drifts by, and he catches it between his forefinger and thumb. Mom had a blouse the same shade of pink as the fresh sakura. Spring had always been her favorite season after all. Not so fast, Deku. Katsuki snarls, snatching Izuku's notebook from the boy's desk. Izuku flinches and almost falls out of his chair. Keikaken, he says, his hands trembling. The other students in the classroom began to leave discreetly, not wanting to be around when Izuku became ground zero. Izuku is still ashamed to say that Katsuki is the only person he's still afraid of, even after years of living on his own. It had been his choice to transfer schools so he could be closer to the place he grew up, so now Izuku had to deal with the consequences. A small, guilty part of him had looked forward to seeing Katsuki again, but he can't explain why. Katsuki flips through the pages, his eyes catching on a specific entry. Izuku cringes as Katsuki's hands start to smoke and his eye twitches. There are some things you just can't stop, huh? Katsuki growls, Izuku's notebook exploding between his metal palms, a boom echoing around the classroom. The smoldering ash fluttering to the floor spurs the flame that begins to crackle in Izuku's chest. Katsuki wipes his hands off on the pants of his uniform, uncaring, as though he'd just touched something unsavory. He stares down at Izuku with contempt. You never learn your lesson. Do I need to give you another scar? He says, the threat hanging in the air between them, a lit match above gasoline. His eyes reveal nothing about his real intentions, serious or not. Izuku swallows the bile that rises up his throat at that and clenches his scarred fists. Another scar was pushing it, but Izuku didn't entirely doubt he would. Hell, he'd blasted him while surrounded by students and teachers, yet nothing disciplinary had ever been done. Sometimes Izuku wondered if Mitsuki even knew, and it was moments like these that reminded him she definitely didn't. Izuku's fingernails bite into his palms. I can't be afraid of you. Heroes are never scared. I'm going to get into Yui. Izuku murmurs through gritted teeth, head hung low. His voice is dangerously level. He rises to stand. You can't stop me. Katsuki laughs, hands settling on Izuku's shoulders with a painfully tight grip. I won't need to. Nobody quirkless has ever gotten into Yui, not even in the general education course. He leans in, so Izuku has no choice but to look into his crimson eyes, blazing with malice. I'll be the first and only Yui student from this shitty public school. Katsuki's hands heat up and start to glow, but Izuku knows it's only a warning. You're insulting everything Yui stands for by even hoping you can get in. Yui is the best. The greatest. The only place for gifted people like me. You're nothing. Let go. Izuku whispers and his hands tremble, but not with fear. Make me. Katsuki sneers, and his palms start to spark, perilously close to the pulse throbbing in Izuku's neck. After a split-second decision, Izuku sucker punches Katsuki in the jaw. Katsuki's face has a satisfying give, a momentary shock. Before he can recover, Izuku holds his bicep and forearm and flips him, muscles creaking with the effort, over his shoulder and onto a desk behind him. Katsuki slams into the table with a cacophony of scraping chairs, groaning as he slips off the wood and onto the floor. I had no idea if that would work, Izuku thinks, something twisting in his belly. After all, Katsuki wasn't Kori. Katsuki rises slowly, grunting in pain. His breathing is labored, his lungs barely recovering from having the wind knocked out of them. At his sides, his palms glow with barely contained heat. "You're dead. You hear me? Dead." He screams, but he stays where he stands, panting, his hands shaking. His eyes flicker with panic. It's almost as though he's afraid, but that can't be true. Katsuki is scared of nothing, right? Izuku takes his chance and skitters away, tripping over his own feet, snatching his backpack from the floor before he goes. He slams the door closed behind him, satisfied when it hits the opposite side with a loud crack. Izuku has nothing but lead in his chest. A hollow victory. Nothing had been gained, and even though he'd prevailed, he was emptier than ever before. Mom would be disappointed, he thinks, trudging slowly through the school halls to the front entrance. I'm no better than him, aren't I? Aizu. Hey, Izuku. Izuku turns when he feels a familiar hand land on his shoulder, kinder than Katsuki's, but the memory still had him shrugging out of it. He doesn't try to force a pleasant smile on his face. What now, Mei? I just want to go home. He complains, fidgeting. Mei, who still looks the same as she did growing up, pink dreadlocks and all frowns. She reaches forward again but then thinks better of it. There's no need to get all snippy with me, mister. She huffs. Mom was wondering if you wanted to come over for dinner. Izuku turns away, so she doesn't have to see the guilt on his face. Can't. He simply replies, resuming the walk back to his footlocker, but Mei grabs his wrist. He jerks back suddenly, and when Izuku decides to look, her eyes are wide and soft. Izuku. She murmurs. Have you not been eating? Is the boys' home not feeding you? You're too skinny. Revulsion wells up in him like a dark mass. Don't touch me, he cries, a reflex he immediately feels awful about. Izuku is a taut string on the verge of snapping, shoulders tense and fists shaking at his sides. Just leave me alone, Mei. The pleasantness fades away, her mask fading. No! She yells, her face going red. All you've done is push us away, and all we want to do is help you. She grits out, poking him in the chest, and Izuku retreats in fear of being bowled over. Tears well up at the corners of her eyes. You're gonna kill yourself like this, Izuku? Don't you want to be happy? Izuku can't look at her. I am happy. Mei throws her hands up, growling in frustration. There it is again. You try and lie so I'll get off your butt, but that sheet doesn't work on me anymore. I'm sick, knowing what you do in your time off. I can't sit here, and you're risking your life every day for an adrenaline high. I don't want to cover for you, I don't want to pretend I don't know anymore. You need to face the facts. Your mom is dead and your father is gone, you're hurting dash. My mother is not dead. Izuku says back, digging his fingers into his hair and ripping at it just so he could do something with his hands. His chest aches something vicious. She's not dead. I'm going to be a hero and I'll bring her home. Mei backs down, the anger draining out of her. She looks at Izuku with pity. He hates it, he despises the face she makes, as if he's some poor kicked puppy in need of coddling. Oh, Izuku! She sighs, reaching out to hold his shoulders, but Izuku slaps her hands away. Enough, he stresses. He begins to walk away again, hands shoved in his pockets. I don't want to be a burden on you, either way. Tell Megumi I couldn't come. Mei is silent and watches him go, shifting on her feet as though she can't decide what to do. Izuku knows it's childish, idiotic even, to cling to the hope he'll find her and piece together his fractured home. He leaves the school behind and enters the courtyard, glad that it's empty. He probably looks like a pathetic child. He sure feels like one. He sits on the wall of the koi pond, slipping off his backpack slowly. He debates making an impulsive decision. He knows it would make him feel better, even though if he's caught, there's the ever-present chance of them being taken. He reaches into his bag and pulls out 2 identical gloves, his magnum opus, grinning to himself sheepishly. He tugs them over his dark fingers, metal expanding slightly to accommodate them, flexing the titanium alloy with no small amount of comfort. These ones held no resemblance to the ones Izuku first built when he was 5. The gloves were sleek and the color of pine needles, reinforced, blast-proof and weatherproof. They fit so snugly that they looked as though they had been built to replace what he already had, like many of the people Izuku knew. When Izuku flicks his finger, he's pleased to see a concentrated flame blossom out of the tip. No one would question if they were professionally made. In fact, he planned on selling them later that month once they were perfected. It's almost like having a quirk. The stress melts off of Izuku's shoulders, and some tenseness eases inside him. I'll be okay. I can do this. He zips up his backpack, glancing down at his hands. Better to hide them, he thinks, and he shoves them into his pockets. He starts on his way home, pushing the lingering memories to the back of his mind, ignoring the cherry trees and the view. The walking distracts him. His mind is carefully blank. When he trudges beneath an underpass, he's nearly through to the other side when he catches the whispered panting. "Please, the boy. Haika-sama will be pleased." He spares a terrified glance behind and double-takes. Izuku barely dodges being consumed by a massive wave of trash-colored goop. "What the hell?" Izuku shrieks, whipping around to look. Behind him, the creature hurries forward, 2 disembodied eyes staring at him with equal parts glee and annoyance. He's quick. He pants, launching his entire body weight at Izuku again, an entity so large he blocks out the sun. Izuku yelps, scrambling to the side and skidding on the ground, tripping on his feet in his panic to get away. Izuku almost makes it too, but one of the sludge villain's hands latches onto his leg, yanking him down. Izuku's chin hits the floor with a painful clack of teeth and blood, and he scrabbles at the ground with his gloves, screaming as he's dragged across the concrete and into the villain's open maw. His cry is cut off as his lungs are invaded with foul-tasting liquid, his throat filled with whatever the villain was made of, pumping through his mouth and nose. Panic, cold dread, makes his limbs seize, and old memories flash behind his eyelids, of times similar to this, forever ago. Izuku flips himself over and claws at the monster, but the thing only laughs. "That's not going to work on me, need to knock him out." The curly-haired boy fights the scared animal in his rabbit heart, the part of him that kept bringing his past to the forefront of his mind. "Remember that time?" It seemed to say. "You're going to die, finish off what he started." Izuku fights the clutches of hysteria that almost have him. "Can't breathe." Izuku thinks frantically, scouring his brain for a way out. "Drowning, I'm drowning." His vision fades, his thoughts become more sluggish. He tries to tear at the creature with his gloves, but his strength is waning. "I can't die like this. I don't want you to follow the destiny set out for you. Think outside the box, bend the rules, I don't care." His mother murmurs in his mind's eye. "You will be a hero." Izuku's eyes well up with tears, his sobs only pushing more air out of his lungs. This wasn't how he wanted to go, this couldn't be the destiny he created. He still had so much he wanted to do. He wanted to eat katsudon, visit that ice cream place, spend more time with his friends. He wanted to get married someday. He wanted to grow up, be an adult, grow old. This couldn't be the end, could it? What would his mother tell him to do? An idea pops into Izuku's head like a flashbang. With an unsteady arm, he punches the villain as hard as he can, letting his right glove sink into his flesh in the backlash. "Please let this work," Izuku prays, his vision steadily going dark, lungs burning anew. Everything goes black, once and for all. "Don't worry, for I am Dash." The underpass is shaken by the force of a violent explosion, the villain is ripped to pieces, inside out, with a flash of blinding white light. Izuku hacks up all the remaining sludge in his lungs having trouble bringing in oxygen. As his body slogs into consciousness again, he reaches around, grasping his glove from where it landed in the aftermath. He slips it on over his fingers again, sighing with relief that it's still intact. It's hardly cool enough to touch, but Izuku manages, just barely. He knows his hands will probably blister, but he can't bring himself to care. The boy is still gasping and choking while footsteps fill any silence left behind. My boy, are you all right? Izuku stiffens and blinks a few times when his brain finally registers who's speaking to him. He struggles to his feet, hiding his hands behind his back, mind still reeling. He almost falls over but stays upright by a sheer force of will. Before him, all his splendor, is the all-might #1 hero, winner of Best Smile 10 years in a row, and Izuku's second favorite person to ever exist. The hero steps forward and pats Izuku on his, now slimy, head of curls. I'm sorry you had to get involved in my villain hunt, but thanks to you, All Might grabs a bottle from his cargo pants and shows it to Izuku, who acknowledges that, while still a little dizzy, it's filled with sludge and 2 disembodied eyes. I captured the criminal in question. Izuku, dazed, simply nods. All Might interrupts him, tone authoritative. I do have to warn you though, that you cannot use a dangerous quirk like yours in public again unless, of course, it's for justifiable self-defense. The muscular man steps out into the sunlight and tenses, ready to jump to the aid of another citizen. Until next time. Wait! Midoriya yells, rushing forward. He does the only thing his traumatized brain supplies. He clings to All Might's leg as he leaps off into the sky at supersonic speed. Kid! All Might yells, trying to shake him off hundreds of feet in the air. Let go! I can't! Izuku screams to be heard over the roar of wind in his ears. I'll die! All Might let out a long-suffering sigh. Very well, the hero says, and the two touch down on the roof of some office building. Izuku trips on the concrete, sputtering, spitting out the bugs he's sure he swallowed. Gross, he grumbles. All Might stands at the edge of the terrace, muttering to himself angrily. Of all the times, Izuku catches him saying, vaguely smoking, "Diamen it all." Wait! Izuku cries again when the man looks like he's about to hop the fence. No, I will not wait. All Might growls, fingers tangled in the chain link. Can I get into Yui without a quirk? Izuku interjects, hands balled at his sides. He closes his eyes. He doesn't want to think about how unlike Hawkase he looks right now, a pitiful child, asking useless questions from a human god. All Might says nothing, save for a wet cough, so Izuku continues rambling. I want to be a hero like you, but I'm quirkless. Everyone says I should join a support company, but that's not what I want, not at all. He feels pressure building behind his eyes. That's never been what I wanted. I can't even imagine a life where I do anything other than heroics. Izuku begins to wring his hands as his nerves catch up to him. My mom disappeared when I was a kid and no one ever found her, not even the heroes. But I want to save her. I want to save the whole world if I can, so no one is left crying and alone anymore. I think that's why saving people is the coolest thing you can do. He scratches at his scar when it begins to itch. I want to make someone smile for once. When Izuku opens his eyes, the man staring back at him is not All Might. He can't be All Might. This guy is emaciated and thin as a stick, so beyond sickly looking, he could be a corpse. Huh! Izuku cries, looking all around. What happened to? The man interrupts him. I am All Might. I'm right here. Blood pours out of his mouth almost comically as he speaks. Izuku gasps, rushing forward and pulling back again, his inner vigilante warring with his inner fanboy. Nevertheless, he reaches into his bag and pulls out a wad of gauze. The vigilante wins. Sir, you're bleeding here, take these, and that can't be healthy dash. All Might sits down heavily, a heaving cough racking his body. He slowly takes the gauze from Izuku's waiting hands. Yeah, tell me about it, he sighs, wiping the blood off his chin with them. Without any preamble, he lifts his shirt, revealing a massive injury in his side. It looks like the impact of an explosion, cracked, scarred skin twisting into a dark epicenter. Izuku stops fidgeting, horror washing over him like ice water. A villain got me 5 years ago. All Might starts. They had to remove my stomach and a lot of my respiratory system. I've wasted away, and I'm limited to 3 hours a day in my muscle form. Muscle form. Izuku has to sit, his bag falling out of his shaking hands, spilling notebooks and an open first aid kit out onto the floor. This is a lot. He mumbles, his mind wiping itself clean and rebooting. The man he'd always known as indestructible suddenly wasn't. He felt as though his entire world was flipping on its back. All Might coughs, blood spilling out of his mouth again. Got any more of that gauze? He asks, and Izuku nods, numb, handing over another wad. About what you said earlier. He says, serious. Are you truly quirkless? That explosion, before, what caused that? Izuku pales and hides a cough in the crook of his elbow. He reveals his hands to All Might, who studies them with confusion. Your biotech is impressive, my boy, but I can't see why you would need any if you're quirkless. Who made them for you? Izuku swallows down his pride. I did, sir. I made them myself. He paused. It's not biotech, not really. It's more like support mech, but I do build biotech on the side. Izuku clicks a button on the wrist of each, and the metal lifts and folds until he can pull them off. He displays them to his hero, whose initial look of shock morphed into one of steel and pity. All Might stood, brushing off his pants. Kid, what you're doing is illegal, to say the least. If I was a better hero, I would be turning you in alongside this villain here. I'm going to guess you don't have a license or any certifications at that. He pats his pocket and limps over to the door leading off the roof. And to answer your question, no, you cannot enter the hero course without a quirk. How can one become a hero without natural power? It's simply not possible. All Might finally jiggles the door open, cool air from the stairwell reaching Izuku's sweaty skin. The boy shakes, his hands fisted in his lap. The man appears oblivious to Izuku's peril. There's no shame in following talent where it leads you, boy. There's always a way off this path you're taking. He stepped through the doorway, throwing one last glance at Izuku. Maybe those people who told you to go into support were right. You could help a lot of people that way too. And if you join the police, though you won't get much honor, you still have a chance to find your mother. All Might closes the door behind him, leaving Izuku alone with his thoughts and the bright sun. I've gotten so far without a quirk, Izuku thinks to himself, gathering his things back into his bag. Have I finally hit the threshold? He waits a few minutes, pausing to stare at the clouds drifting overhead. Do I decide where the ceiling begins? As he walks back to the warehouse, Izuku seriously considers just canceling on Cory after all. Adding All Might's secret to the pile, he already had felt like the straw to break the camel's back, and all he wanted to do was throw on a mask and beat up some unsuspecting bad guys. Alone, where the only thing he needs to communicate is his fists. Izuku is jolted out of fantasies of throwing punches when the ground shakes, something that smells like caramel and smoke drifting through the air. Kaken. Izuku mutters under his breath, following the tremors in the ground. He finds a massive crowd of people and heroes close to the arcade Katsuki frequents. The villain in the center. Izuku gasps and goes cold from his toes to the roots of his hair. Explosions rock the earth and demolish the concrete at Katsuki's feet, and the monster made of sludge tries to force himself into Bakugo's body. Izuku knows that the villain isn't perfectly resistant to Katsuki's quirk, but that means nothing now. By the time anyone figured that out, Katsuki would be dead. It will have been Izuku's fault because he was the one who distracted All Might in the first place. The entire situation seems to be at a standstill. The heroes do nothing but hold the crowd back, watching the case warily, shouting warnings and calls for backup. Backup would never come in time. There simply was no way. The nearest hero agency was more than a mile away. Izuku's eyes catch Katsuki's red irises, blown wide and wet with tears. They plead with him, the same fear he had known mere minutes before reflecting back at him. I don't want to die. Time slows to a standstill in that instant, syrupy moments in between heartbeats. Izuku takes his first step towards something entirely unknown. Izuku pushes through the heroes keeping the people at bay, and before he can think, his legs are moving without him, and he's screaming, but for what? To be heard before he sacrifices his life, alongside Katsuki? does any of this matter? He'll just die, his goal left unattended. He narrowly dodges flaming patches of pavement, and people are yelling at him, begging him to get back, but Izuku is far beyond them now. Time speeds up, too fast for his poor rabbit heart. What do I do? What do I do? He looks over his shoulder and chucks his backpack at the monster, his gloves tucked away inside. He realizes a second too late that he could have used them, but it's too late for that now. The villain roars at him angrily. You! The villain growls, a strange amalgamation of Katsuki's voice and his own. Why are you back? I did my job. Izuku clamps his mouth shut and rakes his nails against the villain to no avail. Deku! Why? Katsuki garbles at him, palms sparking, and Izuku jumps away when the slime swings at him. I don't know. Izuku screams back. Nobody was doing anything. I couldn't stand by and watch. Izuku leaps to the side and grabs Katsuki's hand through the muck, tugging with all his might. Izuku pulls and pulls but starts to panic when sludge creeps up his arm and begins to SCK him in too. He chokes on a frustrated sob. You looked like you needed saving. Is that so wrong? Time runs out. Katsuki's eyes roll up into his head. Izuku yells, unable to dodge as the villain rears to grab at him again. He squeezes his eyes shut, accepting the end. At least they would die together. The air suddenly shifts around him. He turns his head just in time to see All Might's punch force the villain into bits, holding onto the two boys' arms to keep them from being blown away in the backlash. I'm sorry, my boy, but I've been a hypocrite. All Might yells, wind whipping around him in a frenzy. A hero should always be ready to risk his life. Rain begins to plink to the ground as Izuku slowly comes to. That's All Might. He murmurs, his vision phasing in and out of focus. He was right. Afterward, Izuku is chewed out by heroes and promptly sent on his way, not so much as a scratch on his skin to show for his ordeal. I didn't really do anything. Izuku mutters, head hanging low. He clutches the straps of his backpack tightly. Where's the hero in me gone? I really let All Might's words affect me more than I should have. Izuku jumps as someone comes careening around the street corner in front of him. I am cough. All Might yells, deflating into his emaciated form with a spurt of blood and a puff of smoke. All Might? But the reporters. Izuku sputters. The hero simply laughs. Reporters are easy to shake off for a figure like me. He counters as blood drips past his lips. He brushes it off with the back of his hand. Kid, he confides, the fading sun framing him in yellow light, glowing like a god amongst mortals. I've come to thank you. I also have a proposal. Thank me? All I did was get in the way. Izuku sighs, hanging his head low. Self-loathing wells up in him again. That's where you're wrong, my boy. You were more of a hero out there than even I. You really put all us pros to shame. All Might chuckles, placing his hands on his hips. Izuku looks up in shock. Sir? Izuku murmurs, refusing to process his words. Most, if not all, of the world's most renowned heroes showed signs of greatness even as children. All Might continues. Izuku is blinded by the sunset. Some even say they moved before they could even think, if it was to save another. Izuku's legs threaten to buckle when he recalls the commotion of earlier that day. Tears come to his eyes of their own volition. That's what you did, right? All Might asks, his voice full of a fiery conviction that swept Izuku up in its power. You can get into Yui. You can be a hero. Hot tears spill down Izuku's face as he falls to his knees. That's all I needed you to say. That was all the motivation I needed. Because I believe you are worthy of accepting my power. All Might finishes. Izuku freezes dead. I don't understand. He says, wiping the water from his eyes with the back of his hand. All Might grins, but it doesn't look the same in his true form. This concerns my quirk, boy. The world likes to try and guess what it is, but I've never divulged my secret, because the symbol of peace needs to come off as a natural-born hero. Izuku struggles to his feet, brows furrowed. I don't. My quirk, All Might booms, spreading his hands before him in an arc, was given to me, and should you choose to take me up on my offer, I'll pass it on to you. Izuku nearly passes out on the spot. Pass your quirk to me? But I've never heard of a quirk that could be passed on to another. Do you doubt me? All Might raises an eyebrow, and Izuku violently shakes his head. No, it's amazing. The boy is quick to amend. The implications of studying quirks is my hobby, I've got to write this down somewhere. Absolutely not. All Might booms, folding his arms over his chest. The secret of One for All has been well guarded for generations. If that information was to come into the wrong hands, all manner of terrible things could befall its holder. Izuku, both bewildered and curious. One for All? Holder? Yes. My quirk is called One for All, and it works as a power stockpiler. It takes the strength of its previous user and adds it to the next, like a crystalline network. If you became the next holder, you would be the greatest hero the world has ever known, with all my strength and more behind you. The green-haired middle schooler opens his mouth to speak, but the words don't come. All Might continues without him, a prideful glint in his blue eyes. I believe you have the heart, boy. Izuku falls forward onto his hands, finding it impossible for his feet to support him any longer. Do you accept the torch? Do you want to be the next symbol of peace? The greatest hero to ever live? Do I have a reason not to? He's told me all his greatest secrets, told me I could be the best. This doesn't mean I have to break any of my promises. He pauses. He said I couldn't before. He had no faith in me. Who says he'll still believe that I have what it takes down the line? He sighs. Can I have some time to think? All Might frowns slightly. The time for decision is now, my boy. The hero world waits for no one. Izuku chews at his lip and sits back on his knees so he can meet the hero's eyes. They shine cerulean blue, glowing with hidden pride. He sighs. I'll do it then. Give me some enthusiasm, boy. You're going to be a hero. Okay, I'll do it. That's the spirit. Hey, stop crying, heroes don't cry. You've been very withdrawn today. Shudo murmurs, piercing the comfortable silence that has settled between them. Their footsteps echo down the empty streets that they would patrol later that night. Izuku's stomach rumbles, as he'd been too nervous to eat when they were at dinner earlier. I guess I have. Izuku replies. His thoughts are clearly elsewhere. One of the drawbacks to having a mask on the lower half of his face is that Cory can still practically read his thoughts through his eyes. He finds that he can't lie that way. Perceptive as always, Cory. Shudo doesn't smile at that, but when Izuku looks, he can see the boy's face twitch. Did something happen? He murmurs, refusing to meet Izuku's eyes. He adjusts the kabuki mask on his face, giving his hands something to do. Midoriya hums. Yeah. A lot of things. They walk in quiet a little longer. Todoroki swallows he's seen the news. He'd been terrified for Izuku, scared beyond belief when the villain almost crushed him with a massive hand made of slime. But he couldn't even tell Izuku off because he wasn't supposed to know the boy's identity yet. Shudo sighs. This is too complicated for my tastes. Do you want to spar before we go out? He asks, and it gets Izuku to grin at him, eyes scrunched up at the corners. Deal. Midoriya says, taking off like a bullet towards home, forcing Todoroki to chase him. Breathing stale city air into his lungs, Todoroki can't say he's unhappy. Even while he's staring after Izuku's back, knowing he'll never catch up, Shudo is content. He ignores the sad fact that once he gets into Yui, all of this peace, will have to come to an end. But that's a thought for another day. For Izuku, training with All Might was surprisingly surreal. Maybe it was because the man was his childhood hero or because someone was finally willing to give him a shot, but Izuku still practically vibrates with excitement every time he just sees All Might over the crests of the sand dunes every morning. However, today seems to differ from other days in that All Might isn't alone. Izuku freezes when he sees precisely who accomplices All Might this chilly Saturday morning. Aizawa climbs the dunes, ignoring the grit in his shoes, Yagi Tashinori plodding along by his side. Initially, when the hero had come to him requesting assistance, he'd stared at him with mild distaste and considered slamming his door shut. When Yagi had taken the time to describe his problem child to Aizawa, the man had been slightly more intrigued. Now he can see the boy stretching, close to a massive pile of trash by the shore. Things look as though they've been moved around, judging by the deep ridges revealing wet dirt, but with what Yagi's revealed to him, he doubts they've made much progress. Aizawa notes the kid's appearance. He was short, stick-like, and obviously young, but he held himself with a poise Shoyuta recognized in people 3 times his age. His dark eyes glance at Aizawa briefly, quickly making observations before settling back on the horizon. His hair is unkempt, curly, and green, and the scar stretching across his crooked nose is memorable, to say the least. Altogether, though, Midoriya is far from the kind of person Aizawa imagined Yagi taking an interest in. Aizawa looks at All Might out of the corner of his eye. The man in question doesn't smile when he's emaciated like this. He almost appears to be a real mentor. So that's the kid you've chosen to take one for all? Aizawa comments, his foot sinking into the sand a bit with every step. All Might sputters, wiping off the blood on his chin with his sleeve. Not so loud. The man whispers, hiding his mouth behind his hand, glancing around for any onlookers. There's no one around who'd want to hang out in a junkyard. I only told you about my situation out of necessity, Aizawa-kun. I believe I can trust you. Yagi adds. You can. Aizawa sniffs. He looks back at the curly-haired boy, who watches them from the corner of his eye as he stretches out his arms, littered here and there with leathery burns and jagged scars. Why him? The hero drawls, jutting his thumb at Izuku. You have your pick of every student at Yui. Why choose some quirkless middle schooler? For the first time since coming to Aizawa's door a week before, All Might smiles. He proved me wrong once. He has an indomitable spirit. Aizawa sighs. That's just the sort of answer I expected out of you. The man stops and scuffs his feet in the sand. So why'd you call? You've been too vague about all of this business. All Might's gaze drifts to Izuku, who does full splits and barely breaks a sweat. He turns to face Aizawa, looking troubled. Young Midoriya won't accept my power unless he gets into the hero course at Yui first. He said something about a promise or an oath. He was very serious. All Might admits with a frown. Aizawa nods. That explains it, that indomitable spirit is working against him. So you want me to convince him to take your quirk first? The teacher shakes his head, exasperated. Have you had a chance to talk to his parents about it yet? All Might rubs the back of his neck, refusing to meet Aizawa's eyes. Well, Aizawa levels him with a stare. You started training their son to be a hero and didn't even let them know. All Might blushes embarrassed. I assumed young Midoriya would tell his father on his own. Aizawa presses his palm to his forehead. Never trust the child to tell their parents anything, All Might-san. That's teaching rule number 1. All Might. Izuku yells as he jogs up to them. Aizawa leans forward and whispers. We're not done with this. All Might shivers out of fear. Yagi turns to his student and beams. Young Midoriya. I see you've been stretching. The boy smiles, but it doesn't quite reach his eyes. His dark pupils dart over to Aizawa. Yeah, I have. He says with forced optimism. I don't think you've introduced me, he observes with feigned nonchalance, and Aizawa sees the line of tension in his shoulders grow tighter. All Might smiles, clearly oblivious, and nods to Shoyuta. Oh, Midoriya, my boy, this is Aizawa-kun. He's a teacher at Yui. Aizawa bows his head slightly, be it not his nature. Please call me Eraserhead. Midoriya swallows and bows himself, though more apprehensively. My name is Midoriya. Midoriya Izuku. He says when he straightens. Aizawa blinks when the name distantly rings a bell, but he shakes his head. Later. Well, Midoriya. All Might-san has told me a lot about you. Aizawa acknowledges dryly, shoving his hands into his pockets. Midoriya eyes him warily with a smile on his face. Indeed, the boy is an excellent actor, but Aizawa's been a hero long enough to know the difference. He has. Midoriya grins bashfully, rubbing the back of his neck the same way All Might did. The boy still moves rigidly, only heightening Aizawa's curiosity. Is he nervous because I might know All Might's secret or because of something else? All Might laughs in response, patting the boy's head of messy curls. All good things, young Midoriya. The man sighs, and his excellent mood deflates slightly, his hands slipping off of the boy's hair. I brought him because there are some things you refuse to learn from me. Izuku's face drops and darkens in seconds. His hands begin to fidget at his sides, and Aizawa notices how they're burned black at the tips. The boy shoves them into his pockets, out of sight. Is this about? Midoriya murmurs, meeting All Might's eyes with fierce defiance. I'm not changing my mind. I made a promise I don't intend to break. All Might purses his lips, looking to Aizawa. The man sighs. I'm not going to tell you that you can't get into Yui if you're quirkless. I'm sure you've heard that enough. Aizawa starts. Izuku's head jurs up, and he looks to All Might and back, his eyes blown wide with disbelief. Aizawa slips his hands out of his pockets to adjust the capture weapon around his neck, letting it fall into his palms. He smiles conspiratorially, slipping into the person he becomes in front of a class of students needing inspiring. I am going to tell you that it will be almost impossible and so gruelingly difficult that you'll probably wish you were dead. Aizawa grins and is glad to see the gesture returned genuinely. Are you sure you can do it? Midoriya clenches his fist and stares Aizawa in the eyes. He bows deeply. I won't let you down. He straightens and looks to All Might, who appears as though all the blood has rushed to his head. You too, sir. Izuku tries to assuage. All Might doesn't look any less dead inside. The man in question waves him off. Go run 10 laps to the dock and back. He turns to Aizawa. Eraserhead and I have some things to discuss. Midoriya nods and takes off, disappearing behind a mound of trash. All Might sighs heavily, pressing both palms to his eyes. You were supposed to convince him that he couldn't get into Yui alone. Now oh dear. Aizawa rolls his eyes, putting his capture weapon back upon his shoulders. Did you forget exactly what my quirk does, All Might? Did you actually think this through? All Might looks taken aback for a second. I know you have very high standards when it comes to heroes, which is why you're an amazing teacher. He taps his chin, deep in thought. I mostly chose you because I thought you could give him the facts as literally as possible, better than I ever could. Aizawa shakes his head, disregarding the compliment. My quirk is erasure. All it does is level the playing field. I do all of the heavy lifting. All Might blinks and starts to fidget when the realization dawns on him. Aizawa continues, frowning. I wasn't about to lie to your son and tell him that he couldn't be a hero without a quirk when I fight quirkless every day. You bring him down enough. He's not my son. Yagi blurts, his face going red. All Might swallows at the jeer and waves to Izuku when he jogs back their way. Though, I see your point. Maybe I've been unfair to him. All Might says when Midoriya is out of earshot. So it's true? He wouldn't need a quirk to get into Yui? Aizawa barks out a laugh. Into one of the other courses, yes. But the hero course? It's never been done. There are certain people on the admissions team that are going to sneer at his position, but if his grades are good enough, he should at least get into general education. Aizawa regards All Might with a tilted head. I'm curious to see where this endeavor goes. If he passes the hero entrance exam, all the better. If not, he always has another shot at the sports festival, anyways. After a second of deliberation, Aizawa leans in close and whispers dangerously. I only came to see if the kid was as amazing as you say he is, but it's become clear to me that you're having trouble doing this on your own. You may be the #1 hero, but you have far to go before you can become even an adequate teacher. Aizawa turns and walks away to leave. I'll be back next Saturday. Make sure he's still alive by. Then, the man calls over his shoulder. All Might waves to him weakly as he goes. Midoriya jogs to a stop just as Aizawa passes over the last crest and goes out of view. Is Eraserhead-sensei leaving already? Midoriya asks, his voice interrupted by intermittent gasps. He'll be back next week. All Might replies with a smile, patting Izuku on the shoulder. The boy jolts as though he doesn't expect it. You managed to impress him, I think, Yagi adds. That's quite a feat. He expelled his entire homeroom class this year. He's an underground hero, right? Midoriya mumbles quietly, oddly still as the cool spring wind ripples his clothing. He arrests a lot of vigilantes, doesn't he? All Might hums. The world is safer with him around, even if nobody knows it. Midoriya stares after the spot where Aizawa disappeared, and the yellow sun rises above the horizon, coating everything in thick rays of light that do nothing to warm Midoriya's cold bones. Yeah, Midoriya agrees. Safer. Aizawa lounges at his desk, his laptop sat in front of him, next to a strong cup of coffee long gone cold. Case files are strewn underneath his computer, a few on the kitchen table, a number on the kotatsu. One of his cats purrs in his lap. He taps the tip of his pen against some paperwork he'd been mulling over, but the mystery of where he's heard the name Midoriya before bugs him to no end. I've put it off enough, the haggard man whispers to no one in particular, placing the pen to his right and pushing the folder aside, pulling the laptop closer. He brings up Google and searches for the name Midoriya. At first, nothing beneficial comes up. There are plenty of people with variations of the surname Midori. He tries Midoriya Izuku second and frowns at what he finds. 5 news articles outlining the disappearance of one Midoriya Inko, all from 9 years prior, and a eulogy, which was slightly younger. Aizawa clicks on the first one and reads it with growing concern. This past Monday, Mizudafu resident Midoriya Inko was reported missing, with no leads as to her location or any information regarding a potential crime. There appears to be no motive for a sudden disappearance. Nearby security camera footage shows her being lured into an alley and never coming back out. One eyewitness has stated, Aizawa felt something coiling in the pit of his stomach. This story was starting to become strikingly familiar to one he'd been involved with years ago. He continues to read. Inko-san was such a faithful soul. It's hard to believe she'd disappear without a trace. Our eyewitness pauses. No, she'd never leave Izuku-chan. I think she's been taken, says Bakug Mitsuki, a neighbor and friend of the Midoriyas. We have, as of yet, not been able to get in touch with her husband, Hisashi. So far, though, the case has yet to pick up much traction. Aizawa swallows the nausea rearing in his gut. If his suspicions are true, then Shoyuta reaches for his phone across the desk and scrolls through his contacts, looking for one in particular. His phone rings 5 times before it picks up. Eraserhead? Why are you calling so late? The voice on the other side of the line groans. Aizawa glances at the clock on his phone. 02. Oh, I didn't realize. Sorry. Aizawa murmurs as he starts to scroll through the article again. The man laughs. Don't be. I was just finishing up some paperwork. I'm sort of glad you called. It's been rather dull at the office. Crime is down 3 points. That's good to hear. He pauses, glancing down at the computer screen again to collect his thoughts. Tsukachi, what do you know about Midoriya Inko? Shoyuta asks, reaching for a piece of scratch paper and a pen. He labels the top, Midoriya, and draws a sharp line under it. Tsukachi hums, deep in thought. Oh yeah, I remember that case. She was kidnapped and pronounced dead a year later. We found some of her blood at the scene, her wallet, her smashed cell phone, and her broken shoes, but we never recovered her body. Aizawa furrows his brow. Are you sure she's dead? On the other side of the phone, Tsukachi sighs, and Aizawa could hear rapid typing. She was taken by Nightcrawler when he still lived. That was back when... He clears his throat. He worked for All for One. Aizawa completes. Yes, I remember. I participated in the raid of Crawler's base. You were saying? It was such a strange case, I think that's why I stayed on it for so long, Tsukachi affirms, flipping a paper. All for One just doesn't kidnap civilians. There was something bigger going on, so much bigger. But I was forced to drop it, my supervisor just wasn't convinced. The detective pauses. And Midoriya-san's son, sometimes I still worry about him. He was bullied a lot, I could tell. And he had a scar on his face, not a cute one either. He wouldn't tell me how he got it. There was also the fact that he still believed his mom was alive and out there somewhere, waiting for him. Poor kid. Aizawa swallows thickly. It isn't often that things intimidate him, but Izuku's past most definitely does, now that he's confident that he has the right Midoriya. I found him, Aizawa adds with a small smile. That kid you're talking about? He wants to be a hero. Of course he does. Tsukachi laughs, but it sounds sad. He has so much potential, he can do anything he puts his mind to, the detective utters poignantly. But none of that matters when he doesn't want to do anything realistic. It's such a shame he's quirkless. He lived with me for a few weeks, he wouldn't stop going on about All Might. He can hear Tsukachi's smile. You should have seen his face when I told him I knew the guy. Oh really? Aizawa murmurs with a tired chuckle. His eyes finally drift back to the paperwork he's abandoned. I've got to let you go, I just wanted to ask a quick question. I'll call you whenever it's convenient again, Tsukachi. Stay safe. You too, Tsukachi says, and the line goes dead. Aizawa slips his phone into his hoodie pocket, jostling the fluffy mass lying in his lap. He scratches her behind the ears, and the calico cat mewls gently. I'm going to guess that All Might-san has no idea, Aizawa murmurs to her. And I'm going to have to be the one to tell him. How grand. Mro. The cat replies cleverly, butting her head into his hip. Midoriya slipped in the back door of his warehouse, which was really just the window Cory had broken in December. April is winding down now, and Izuku long got used to the masked boy's presence in his life. Somehow, he feels like Shudo knows so much more about Izuku than he's letting on, but Izuku's never pressed, so Cory's never told. Shoki! Izuku calls, walking along the upper deck. I'm home. There's silence downstairs. Izuku chews at his lip and descends the stairs as quietly as he can, his hand trailing along the railing with the faint sound of skin brushing against metal. At the bottom, things are the same as he left them that morning, though it's close to 10 now, and the sun is far above the horizon. Shoki sleeps peacefully, snoring gently and tucked into Cory's hip, laying on top of the sleeping bag beside Izuku's futon. The boy still wears his mask, fine black hair falling over his eyes as he lays on his side, hands curling and uncurling as warm sunlight passes over his skin with every cloud. Izuku pauses, hanging onto the last of the railing. It feels like the air has been knocked out of him. He's never had the urge to hold someone's face between his palms before. Izuku shakes his head and turns away, leaving his shoes by the side door. These aren't appropriate thoughts to be having about your kohai, Izuku thinks to himself, and he reaches into his pocket and grabs his medical mask. The fabric feels rough under his damaged fingertips. He's about to slip it over his ears when a rough voice quietly calls out, "Don't." Izuku turns his head to Shudo, who stops him with an intense dual-toned gaze. The boy blows the hair out of his eyes, and the corners of his mouth quirk up slightly. I like seeing your face. Izuku frowns but pads over to his workbench in the corner and sets his mask down, for later, if he decides to patrol. Izuku kneels in front of his microwave and grabs a can of chicken noodle soup for Cory to eat for breakfast. I don't think you've ever stayed the night before, Cory, Izuku comments gently, pouring the contents of the can into a ceramic bowl. He hears Shudo sit up, somehow without jolting Shoki awake. I hope you don't mind. Cory murmurs with a yawn. We got in late last night, and this place isn't exactly close to where I live. It's fine, Midoriya says. The microwave beeps, so Izuku pulls the bowl out and walks over to where Shudo blearily rubs his eyes. He sits down in front of him, cross-legged, and hands him the soup. Sorry, Izuku smiles. We ran out of spoons. Shudo takes the bowl gratefully, but he pauses, and his eyes search Izuku's face, lingering on the scar despite his best efforts. It dents his cheeks, a shallow chasm that spreads like canyons below his eyes and across his nose, colored shades of pink and white that do nothing for his pale complexion. It's ugly, I know, Izuku laughs self-consciously, ducking his head to hide behind his hair. Then he adds quietly, there's a reason I hide my face so much. Shudo's thumb and forefinger hook under his chin, forcing Izuku to look up and meet his eyes. Cory purses his lips. Izuku swallows nervously. Too close, oh my god, oh my god. It's not as bad as you think, he murmurs, dropping his hand, and Izuku huffs out a laugh. You can be honest with me, he smiles. You're my friend. Shudo tilts his head, the corners up his lips lifting, just barely. We're friends? Izuku grins. As long as you'll have me, he laughs, and a breath of air that could have been passed off as a chuckle leaves Shudo's lips. Shudo can't recall the last time someone had smiled at him like that, not out of obligation or politeness. Some small part of him twinges, like a match striking a box, something like sparks trying to light in his chest. In no way is it unpleasant, but it's new, and Shudo is loath to lean into it too much. For a second, something is hanging in the air between them, and it makes Midoriya breathless. Izuku releases Shudo's hand, and the other boy slurps his soup out of the bowl to fill the silence, and the tension dissipates. He meets Izuku's eyes over the lip, the both of them giggling. He watches Izuku's ears turn a pretty shade of red, and just like every other part of him, Shudo finds it utterly endearing. Todoroki has no idea why he asked Midoriya to leave his mask off. Now, Shudo can see his smile and the dimple on his right cheek, which is a bit too much to handle, he feels. The dense sunlight caresses his face again, bringing back the persistent sleepiness he'd been trying to shake for almost 20 minutes now. Izuku laughs when Shudo yawns for too long, and Todoroki remembers why he brought it up in the first place. After being woken by the sound of Izuku's shoes clanging against metal on one of the upper levels, he tried to go back to sleep. When he opened his eyes again, Midoriya had been right there, at the bottom of the stairs, wearing the softest of smiles. Todoroki never wanted to see that look hidden away again. That was it. Shudo lifts the bowl to his lips again and watches Izuku over the rim. He knows that he can get Midoriya to laugh if he slurps loudly enough, but the silence that shrouds them is comforting. Midoriya strokes Shoki's back with blackened fingers as the crow sleeps, tucked against Todoroki's left hip. The curly-haired boy sighs, and the pink scar shifts over his nose when he grins. Shudo finishes his bowl of thin soup, still unsatisfied, but he doesn't mind. He sets the bowl off to his side, careful not to make a sound. He knows that this moment will shatter when he does. Shudo's always been the type to dig his nails in whenever something makes him feel happy, and he won't let Izuku go for anything. Midoriya's dark eyes shift away from Shoki as he bites his lip, lost in thought. After a minute, his gaze meets Shudo's, and something pangs in Todoroki's chest. Kori, Izuku murmurs, his hands settling in his lap. Do your parents know where you are? Shudo feels the soup in his belly sour. He opens his mouth to speak, but the phone in his pocket rings and cuts him off. He pauses and grabs his phone, hissing when he spots the caller ID. Izuku furrows his brow as Shudo stumbles to his feet and almost trips over the empty bowl lying on the floor beside the sleeping bag he borrowed. He races to the door and throws it open, stepping into the dirty alley, bare feet and all. He answers the call just before it goes to voicemail. The line clicks as it picks up, and he can hear his sister's relieved sigh as he lifts the phone to his ear. God, Shudo, Fuyumi breathes. I was so scared when you weren't in your room this morning, I thought you'd been taken. Shudo bites his lip until he tastes iron as something turns over in his stomach. I'm sorry I worried you. He replies sincerely, leaning into the cold brick wall at his back. Grit bites his feet. I didn't plan on staying over for so long. Fuyumi goes silent. Staying over? With who? Shudo feels ice creep up his jaw, and he wipes it away with his left hand. A schoolmate. We were working on a project. He lies, his tongue made of lead. He didn't want to lie to his sister, but he couldn't very well tell her where he really was. A breeze smelling of iron ruffles his hair. He clears his throat and murmurs, It's not that big of a deal. Fuyumi sighs. Maybe. She affirms softly. I was just scared that you. She trails off, and Shudo only feels more guilty. He kicks a bottle away with his heel as he searches for the right words to say. Call me next time? Please? I won't be like Tuya, Shudo tells her quietly after a moment of deliberation. I'd never leave you, you still live with him. Shudo hears a sniffle over the line, and something in his chest clenches. I didn't even know you remembered his name. She falters, choking on a smile. Shudo tightens his grip around his phone until he hears the metal creaking. The old man can't take everything from me, despite what he thinks. He spits. Fuyumi sighs bitterly. Please don't be upset, Shudo. Dad is going to be away for another week. There's no use in getting riled up about things now. Shudo doesn't respond, so she continues. Anyway, who's this classmate you're staying over with? Now, Shudo feels stuck and he chews his cheek. They've had this conversation before. Just a friend. Don't get the wrong idea. He stresses gruffly, but Fuyumi gets excited anyway. Fuyumi squeals, and Shudo pulls the phone away from his ear for a second. Are they a girl? How long have you been friends? Should we invite them over sometime? Well, I have no idea if they're a hero fan, so maybe that'd be a bad idea, or maybe that's good. Fuyumi! Shudo groans, dragging his left hand down his face, frustrated. We're not inviting him over. I don't want father anywhere near him. He drops his voice to a whisper. Also, he's not a very big fan of Endeavor, anyways. Oh. Fuyumi concedes. She pauses and Shudo can hear her smile. So it's like that? Shudo jumps and accidentally hits his head on the brick directly behind him. I swear it's not. He hurries to correct her, but Fuyumi only laughs. It's so funny when you get worked up, Shudo. I'm only teasing, she says, and then she sighs. It's been a while since I heard you get so fired up. They must be really special. Shudo feels the muscles in his face twitch. Maybe. The two siblings pause and the silence draws on. Fuyumi speaks first. She's getting better. She decides, voice brittle and feathery, as though she senses she's skating on thin ice. She asks about you when I visit sometimes. Memories of old All Might specials and boiling water start to play behind Shudo's eyelids as he presses them shut. I can't talk about her right now. Shudo can almost see her frown. Okay. She responds, and silence follows for a few tense moments. I'll leave you to study, she says, finally. Stay safe. Shudo knew she was thinking of him with stay safe, their customary goodbye. It held none of the weight that I love you did, and none of the strings of see you soon. Being attached to a pro hero was one of the most dangerous positions in the world, so there was never a guarantee that if you left home, you'd return in one piece. Endeavor had torn apart any semblance of easy love shared among their family, so stay safe had become the easy way out of the sad silence that followed every conversation. Yuki Rei had started the tradition, and it was the duty of her children to carry it on. A rock bites into his bare foot when he shifts his feet, and he swallows the emotion threatening to rise up his throat. Yeah. You too. He echoes, pulling the phone away from his ear. He hangs up. He slips his phone into his sweatpants pocket, wipes the sleep from his eyes with the back of his hand. The sunlight refuses to pierce the mouth of the alleyway, but Shudo's never really noticed the chill. Still, it would be nice. Fuyumi told him once that his mother preferred the cold. He takes another moment to compose himself. He's confident that the second Shudo walks back into the warehouse, Izuku would be able to tell he was upset. He takes a deep breath and wrinkles his nose when a passing car stirs up the scent of filth. Shudo gives up and turns from the wall, tugging the door open by its rusted metal handle. Izuku looks up as Shudo comes in, achingly rising from the floor where he'd been rolling up the sleeping bag. Was that them? He asks, holding the bag under his arm as he pauses, gauging what he can see of Shudo's expression under the mask. Shudo doesn't know how to respond to the expression of utter concern on Izuku's face. It's odd how it makes his stomach twist. He shoves his hands in his pockets and glances away, glad that no one can see the heat rising high on his cheekbones. Yeah. He responds non-committally, plopping down on Izuku's futon next to Shoki, who remains sound asleep. He strokes her back feathers, and the crow coos quietly. Izuku busies himself with shoving the sleeping bag into a filing cabinet on the far side of the room, glancing over his shoulder when Shudo stays silent. Do you want to talk about it? He asks cautiously, patting down the fabric before quietly sliding the cabinet shut. He wipes off his palms on his shorts and pads over to settle beside Shudo on the futon, leaning against the wall. When Shudo doesn't answer, he tinkers with a small sleeve on his lap. Shudo watches vaguely, his awareness fading in and out. The quiet between them is comfortable, as it always is. Shudo finds himself looking at Izuku's scar out of the corner of his eye whenever he can. The jagged line that cuts across the bridge of his nose might have looked ugly on anyone else, but Shudo likes it, likes how, in ways, it reminds him of his. Before Shudo can stop himself, he finds himself blurting, "How did you get your scar?" Midoriya freezes, his hands stilling where they'd been fiddling with a sensor hidden in the wrist. He looks up at Shudo with wide eyes, and the boy in question tries not to appear too interested in the answer. The curly-haired boy resumes what he'd been doing, but his gaze clouds. "Do you really want to know?" Izuku queries softly, the shadowy planes of his face deepening. Shudo suddenly wonders if this was a bad idea, but he nods anyway. He gets the feeling that Izuku had been waiting for him to ask, or maybe subconsciously hoping for it. There was something about finding a kindred spirit that made the secrets want to tumble out. Izuku puts the sleeve and his tools off to the side and rests his hands in his lap. He sighs and shakily runs his fingers through the tangles in his hair. "I've told you that I'm quirkless before. You know how rare that is, right?" He laughs, but the sound is pained. His eyebrows furrow and his lips twist into a shape that doesn't look right. Only 2% of the population is quirkless these days, and they estimate the number is even lower if you take into account all the people with quirks that could be invisible. Midoriya shakes his head, clearing his mind of excess clutter. "My best friend," he murmurs, "was a natural-born hero. His quirk was perfect for that sort of thing, but he had a nasty disposition. He didn't like quirkless kids, especially ones who got uppity." Shudo blinks. He doesn't like the way this story is going. He scoots over until he's giving Izuku his full attention, and the latter continues before he can get too lost in memories past. Izuku clenches his fists, staring at the line where ruined flesh meets healthy skin. His voice quivers with anger as he speaks. "All I ever wanted was to be a hero, like he would be someday. He was just so cool, I found myself imitating him, or trying to protect the people he wanted to hurt, because I wanted to be someone's savior, for once in my life. I wanted someone to look at me, see me as someone who could actually do something. I wanted to be someone big, someone strong. Someone who could make anyone smile. But..." He pauses, his next breath leaving shakily. "The last time I ever tried to stand against him." Izuku uncurls his fingers and lifts them to trace the deep gash across his cheeks, stumbling over his words. "He blew my face in with his quirk and ran away." Shudo hadn't expected that, but it made sense, of course it did. People like Izuku wanted to save people for no reason other than the fact that it made them happy. Could Shudo say the same? What ideals did Shudo have to be proud of? Did his lineage nullify any merit he might have? Izuku goes to wipe the wetness from his eyes, but Shudo catches his hands and squeezes. Midoriya shoots him a shocked look, but Shudo lifts his chin and tries his best to look reassuring. "It's okay if you cry," he points out. He laces his fingers with Izuku's in a way he remembers his own mother doing when he was upset. "I think you deserve it." Izuku's ears turn red as he smiles, but his grin melts off a moment later as he seems to realize something. He pulls his hands away from Shudo's. He refuses to meet his eyes. "Thank you," he murmurs as a tear runs down his cheek, unbidden. Shudo feels fulfilled for the first time in a while, so he allows the corners of his lips to turn up. "Anything for you," he says, meaning every word. Izuku looks up at him hesitantly, edges stained by hope and something darker. He doesn't say a word. The days are slow, and the nights are even slower, sometimes. Every morning when the lights turn on, Inko wakes up, rises from her stiff bed, with no small amount of cricks in her neck, and carves a line into the wall across from where she sleeps. When she is done, she always takes a moment to count all of them. Inko holds the chunk of concrete in her nimble fingers, turning it over and over as the number gets higher and higher each day. She counts 3,285 dashes. 9 years. She murmurs, her voice scratchy from disuse. She'd almost forgotten the right words to say. "It's been 9 years since I've seen him." Dread sits heavy in her gut. She lets the piece of rock fall to her bare feet. How much of Izuku's life had Inko missed? Who was he now? Had he grown up while she had been stuck in a prison cell, reading the same books over and over? Had he moved on while she thought about him every moment of every day she was gone? The thought was like a dagger to her heart. Izuku probably wouldn't recognize her now, rail-thin, green hair gone dull and striped with white, smile lines gone. She turns away from the wall. She couldn't stand to look at it. Every mark was just another failure. How could she call herself a mother? The rest of her room lacks any personality. The other walls were covered in dull, off-white plaster. Some of it had peeled away, revealing the same concrete that made up the floor underneath. Inko's twin-sized bed stayed bolted to the floor in the corner, the toilet opposite. This was her life, her monotonous existence. At that moment, the heavy whitewash door, standing sentinel across from her bed, creaks to life. Inko jumps as two heavily muscled guards lumber into the room, both clad in black, their meaty heads almost scraping the ceiling. Inko backs up against the wall, her heart pounding. Without a word, the two men grab her shoulders and force her arms behind her back. One of them growls when she cries out in pain. The mother grits her teeth but doesn't fight back. She remembers her treatment when she'd first been taken. She's dragged out into the hall, and for a brief second, she can see separate corridors stretching forever onwards both ways, eventually splitting off further. A massive hand grasps the back of her head and forces her to look down, Inko's view obscured by the hair falling in front of her eyes. They walk for what seems like miles, taking seemingly random turns, their footsteps echoing off the walls being the only sound. Her near-atrophied legs are sore when they finally stop, and ahead, she hears the opening of a heavy door. Unceremoniously, she's thrown inside, and her weak muscles struggle to pull herself from the floor. The room is completely dark, save for the light of a monitor partially obscured by a chair and medical equipment just ahead of her. Her knees shake, but she still squares her shoulders. The black mass swivels around, tugging IVs and respirator cords with it. The figure sitting in the chair chuckles from deep in his throat. Inko. He breathes to the steady beat of a heart monitor. It's been too long. Inko takes a step back when she recognizes his voice. Hisashi. She chokes out, her throat closing up in fear. What is going on? All will be explained in due time. He interrupts her, and Inko can see his form shift vaguely. Inko opens her mouth to argue but suddenly changes her mind. Izuku applied to Yui's hero course. Hisashi starts with no preamble. He is already close to fulfilling his purpose. Inko frowns. He manifested a quirk? Hisashi smiles cruelly, and Inko can see the gleam of his teeth reflecting the monitor's light. I took his quirk the day he was born. It would only ever fill him with pride and conceit as most quirks do. The only way to keep a weed from growing is to rip out the roots. I mitigated the problem before it could begin. He coughs. But that is besides the point. Inko went cold all over, anger churning in her stomach. What do you mean you took it? And where is my little boy? She jabs a finger at him. Tell me whatever the hell is going on here, Hisashi, or so help me dash. A ball of fire bursts to life in Hisashi's palm, casting shadows in the places where a nose and eyes used to be. He grins when he wills it to burn brighter, and Inko swallows the nausea welling up in her belly. All for one snuffs out the flame with a flick of a hand. His quirk is interesting, to say the least. Pyrokiness is a hero's power. I had my doubts, given the weakness of your quirk, but your family's lineage pulled through in the end. Your father would be proud. Wait, what about his pinky toe? I thought that the mutation. Complete lies. There's never been a way to tell someone quirkless from someone normal. Inko grits her teeth and resists tearing this room to shreds, starting with that stupid respirator and its stupid whirring sound. She takes a deep breath, forcing down her overwhelming rage. I have bigger fish to fry. You were saying? Right? He concedes. I created him to destroy the symbol of peace, he begins. Inko stiffens. All Might? What does All Might have to do with Izuku? I've molded Izuku into the perfect candidate to receive All Might's quirk, and when the time comes, he'll give it to me. Hisashi continues. He's already won the man's favor, and succeeded where his siblings could not. It's only a matter of time before my plan comes together. How had Izuku ever come to know All Might? If Hisashi had taken Izuku's quirk, that must mean there had to be a way to do it the other way as well, to give instead of receive. The image that conjured was unsettling. If she understood correctly, Hisashi intended for their son to be nothing more than a receptacle for some unknown power, the disposable cardboard box to be tossed away when his end was met, and he'd gone through one too many boxes. Which begged the question, how many women had wound up like her? Used and then locked out of sight? Inko knows she's missing too many pieces to see the big picture, but she pauses as cold realization dawns on her. Why are you telling me this? What do you mean by giving quirks? And Izuku has siblings I don't know about? She asks quietly, already sensing what the answer is. Why keep me alive if you wanted me out of the picture? You're a clever girl. Hisashi grins. The day will come when Izuku will be here, containing the only quirk I've never been able to take by force. I'll need you to coerce him into giving it up, willingly, or I will be forced to resort to more unsavory methods. He says, with the ease of someone talking about squashing a bug. I hope you understand. Inko swallows as her hands begin to shake. She buries them into the thin fabric of her hospital gown. You need me to be a bargaining chip. Exactly, Hisashi replies coolly. And if you don't agree, I'll get rid of you just as easily as I made you disappear the first time. He leans forward, voice drenched in malice. The world believes you're dead, Midoriya Inko. She heard the subtext. Inko sighs shakily. She already knew she had no intention of betraying her son. She makes up her mind, then. You can count on me, she lies quietly, and Hisashi grins. I can't believe you, Izuku snarls, gently helping Shudo sit down on his futon. Why the hell did you think that was a good idea? Shudo frowns as he lets Izuku shove him into a more comfortable position, leaning on the wall. He shifts slightly, and stars dance behind his eyelids. If I hadn't rushed in, he coughs, feeling something warm trickle down his hip, you'd be the one bleeding right now. As Izuku darts around the room, looking for supplies, Todoroki lets his fingers trace over the tear in his hoodie, sticky with blood. He frowns deeper and pulls away as his entire right half starts to grow uncomfortably hot. A couple seconds later, Izuku returns with a first aid kit, which he lays on the floor next to where he kneels down. He wears his mask, so Todoroki can't see his dimple. What a shame. Hold still, he murmurs, all anger drained away, replaced with concern and guilt. He unzips Shudo's hoodie and slowly peels away his t-shirt. Shudo winces and hisses a breath out through his teeth, and Izuku's eyes get cloudy as he gazed at the wound on Shudo's side. The bullet only grazed you, Midoriya reassures him, turning away to grab the antiseptic. If it had been up by an inch or two, it would have hit your ribs or your lungs. Shudo swallows, his throat oddly dry. But it didn't. I'm fine mostly. Midoriya pours some of the liquid onto a gauze pad, his fingers stiff. He presses it to Shudo's side, wiping away all the dried blood. Shudo mutters a curse under his breath as it stings, and Izuku's lips flatten into a straight line. I'm sorry, Izuku whispers, setting the stained gauze to his side and grabbing a fresh one. If it hadn't been for me, you never would have been in danger in the first place. Shudo shakes his head. It was my choice. Izuku finishes cleaning the wound silently. He reaches into the kit for a needle and sutures. After a moment he speaks again. How far will you go? What do you mean? Shudo asks cautiously, warily eyeing the needle as Izuku threads it. What if you die? Izuku questions, bringing the needle to Shudo's side. I won't die if you're with me. Shudo counters, wincing with surprise as Izuku pierces the skin along the gash. He holds in a gasp. Izuku doesn't respond and instead changes the subject. What's your favorite color? He murmurs, drawing the suture through with shaking hands. Shudo didn't really have one. Guess. He says, and he watches the edges of Izuku's eyes wrinkle with mirth. Blue. Right. He says, without another thought, because if that's what Izuku thinks it is, then he won't disagree.